Chapter 61. Go, my friend. 6 minutes. As expected, the stronger the target, the shorter the skill lasts. Ming checked his watch as the noise inside the bar died down. The effect had held longer than he'd feared. He'd been worried Wang Hu's strength might shrug off the Gotham scepter, so he'd prepared a Viper potion as a backup. Not long after, Wang Hu stepped into the Continental's lobby, face dark, with Luo Li trailing nervously behind him. Winston stood where he always did, composed and unreadable. "Jonathan left a while ago," Luo Li blurted. "But you know where he went, don't you?" Wang Hu advanced on Winston, voice low and threatening. "If I'm right, you plan to attack the man in charge here, the most heavily guarded place in New York." Winston only smiled. At his signal, a ring of assassins melted out of the crowd and closed around Wang Hu and Luo Li. Wang Hu's expression shifted. He just triggered a mutation and was badly drained. Worse, black markings crawled over his right hand, wounds left by his teammate Lao Gu before he died. Those markings hurt him more than any spell from the Heaven's Path had. He couldn't sustain another major fight. "Leave!" he barked, and without another word, he grabbed a surprised Luo Li and fled the Continental. Winston watched them go, satisfaction smoothing his face. Santino's ambition to take New York was over. Santino was dead, killed by one of his own recruits. It had happened on Santino's turf, but because it was an internal killing, Winston would be spared blame. Wang Hu, however, had a much worse fate. He'd killed a Kimura leader, been a central player in the Frankenstein versus Mage chaos in the park, and he'd violated the High Table's rules by shedding blood inside the Continental. Winston waited until they were clear of the lobby before taking out his phone. Verification code 11111, he spoke into it. Wang Hu, expelled, order confirmed. As manager of the Continental, Winston had the authority to expel a member from the High Table. Expulsion was worse than an open bounty. Bounties came with rewards, but still allowed a member to use High Table services. An expelled person got no help. Anyone who aided him would suffer severe reprisals. Winston pocketed the phone and murmured, "The hunt has begun." "For all that, I doubt anyone can finish him off," he added softly. Ming and John stepped out of the shadows, a reminder that they hadn't left at all. Winston shook his head. He was beyond the hunger for power. He didn't want to tangle with mutations or magic that might kill him on the way to a reward. Better to let others tire themselves out. Ming smiled. "Lots of High Table folk might not want to kill him," he said, "and it's smarter to let him be worn down than to waste our own strength." He explained what he suspected. Reincarnators had many tricks for survival, including methods that resulted in mutual destruction. The Pantheon faction's trio was down to 2, and the black patterns on Wang Hu's hand weren't a boon. They were a remnant of someone else's reversal. Ming's current targets weren't just Wang Hu and his group. The Heaven's Path faction also had to be dealt with. They'd been assigned to protect John, and yet hadn't shown up for long stretches. What kind of protection was that? It was time to clean up their mess. Their conversation was cut off when Karan, the receptionist, walked in and spoke in his clipped, efficient way. "There's a Chinese man outside who says he's looking for Mr. Wick." Ming immediately suspected the Heaven's Path faction. John nodded, and Charon led the man in. Winston quietly slipped away. The newcomer was unsteady on his feet. He looked worn, hardly the image of a confident protector. He bowed slightly to John. "Mr. Wick, my name is He Zhang. We were sent to protect you." He Zhang's gaze shifted toward Ming with an approving nod. "And you must be Mr. Wizard," he said with respectful curiosity. "By order? Who sent you?" John asked. He was puzzled. He'd been relieved at the thought no one was pursuing him, and the idea that someone had specifically assigned bodyguards seemed strange. He Zhang hesitated. "I'm sorry, we can't disclose that, but please believe we mean no harm." Ming inwardly smiled. Mysterious-sounding vagueness, classic cover. John glanced between them. "How many are with you?" "3, He Zhang replied, scanning the lobby. "One of them is the mage who appeared in Central Park." John and Ming exchanged looks. That mage had clashed in the park. His presence could be useful or dangerous. "Which side are you from?" John pressed. "One group wants to kill me, another claims to protect me." He Zhang struggled for words. In their world of missions and reincarnation, he couldn't reveal the inner workings of their organization. "This is a trial," he said finally. but I swear it will not harm you. John's jaw tightened. Santino's corpse still lay like a warning. He couldn't take mysterious help on faith. I'm sorry, but we can't have someone we don't trust watching our backs. He declined, and Li Ming silently agreed. He Zhang looked crestfallen. He'd failed to secure his assignment. Before he could leave, Li Ming put in a thought that rekindled the man's hope. Right now, Li Ming said, the biggest threat to Jonathan is Wang Hu. If your mission is to protect John, then your job is to deal with Wang Hu. He Zhang brightened at that. He understood how dangerous Wang Hu was, and that their own strongest, Hu Feiyang, was still badly injured. Li Ming added one more detail. Wang Hu went berserk earlier and killed one of his own. When he left, his right hand was blackened, and he looked pained. He might be wounded from an internal fight. At that, He Zhang's eyes lit up. If Wang Hu had turned on a teammate and the sorcerer among them was dead, there was an opening. The mage had caused Hu Feiyang a lot of trouble. Losing him would shift the balance. This was the chance they needed. All right, He Zhang said quickly. We'll go. Good, Li Ming replied, smiling. Go, my friend. Chapter 62, The Hospitable Assassin. Wang Hu felt like he was losing his mind. Lao Gu had died for no apparent reason, and before he could make sense of it, the whole world seemed to have gone berserk. At least Luo Li was still on the case, keeping tabs on the assassin world's movements. He knew he was wanted everywhere now, but he hadn't expected the last 2 days to be this bizarre. Being recognized by some thugs on a back road was one thing. Sleeping under a bridge and getting ambushed by a homeless man who pulls out a custom pistol worth $3,000 was another. Wherever there were people, there seemed to be an assassin nearby, so Wang Hu avoided crowds and hid in the corner of an empty park. A mother pushing a stroller passed. He glanced at her without much thought. The woman winked and casually pulled a submachine gun out of the stroller, spraying bullets at his head. After dealing with her, an absurd thought crawled into his mind. Is the whole world full of assassins? Annoying as they were, none of them had done him much harm. He'd taken every one of them down. Ugh! Wang Hu bit back a groan and clutched his right arm with his left. The curse Lao Gu had laid on him before dying was worsening. He'd managed to exchange for a weakened version of the T-103 Tyrant bloodline, enough that his body could shrug off most conventional weapons, but against a curse he could do nothing but endure. Luo Li, any news? Luo Li had long since fled under the pretense of gathering intelligence to avoid being a target herself. Yes, Luciano Antonio, the new leader of the Camorra, has arrived in New York. He's here to meet John Wick to demand an explanation for Wick's assassination of the Pope. Exactly. Luo Li was already at a high-end restaurant, swirling a glass of red wine. The meeting's tonight at 8 at Knight's Cathedral. Luciano's arrival was secret, but my informant is a Camorra member. Where? At the cathedral tonight. Wang Hu bit into a nutrient bar from his spatial inventory. Perfect. We'll slaughter them all tonight. Luo Li's tone turned cautious. With your injuries, shouldn't you rest a bit? We've already lost half our numbers. The Heaven's Path faction hasn't taken any casualties yet. Rest? My medicine's used up. He sounded defensive. Do you have any left? Mine's gone too. I gave the last of it to you. Luo Li said it without offering up her own healing items. She'd rather not reveal them. If the mission failed, she could take the points hit. If she died with nothing saved, she'd be truly stuck. Wang Hu sneered, but didn't press it. Lao Gu's curse gets worse over time. If we drag this out, that mage will have healed. All right, I'll go find better gear. Make it high-powered. She agreed. After the call, Wang Hu took his last dose of medicine from his personal space and injected it. The black veins on his right hand receded and shrank. Reincarnators like to play mind games. He was used to it. Meanwhile, on the Heaven's Path side, Hu Feiyang had played his trump card and restored himself to combat readiness. This is 3 against 2, and there are so many assassins helping us. If you two mess up again, we'll all die in this world together. The tone was flat, threatening. Yesterday in Central Park, He Zhang and Ban Ping had fled, leaving Hu Feiyang grievously wounded. If they deserted again, he vowed he'd drag them down with him. We won't, they promised. We'll do our best. They all knew this was the final battle. Slacking again was unforgivable. Did Li Ming set the plan? Hu Feiyang asked. To lure the Pantheon faction to the church and ambush them? Yes, he said the assassins would send people to help. He Zhang, who had met Li Ming, answered. Did John Wick have any objections? Li Ming did most of the talking. John listened to him. Everything went as Li Ming wanted. He Zhang asked, Are you worried about something? No. Hu Feiyang shook his head, assuming the calm look of a veteran. The protagonist handles the action. The associate handles the plan. It's a common setup in mission worlds. Ban Ping chimed in with his worry. What if, after we finish with the Pantheon faction, this world starts hunting us? We're reincarnators. Exposing our strength in a mission world makes us targets. Hu Feiyang snorted. You planning to live off the protagonist now? No. Ban Ping laughed awkwardly. Time was short. Li Ming and John arrived at the designated position. Is everything ready inside? Li Ming asked. Yes, the disguised Luciano and Mr. Wick entered the church and just left through the tunnel. Only the mage and 2 others remain inside, a member of the D'Antonio family reported. Li Ming nodded, satisfied, and began to arm himself. John watched as Li Ming produced a scepter topped with a carved owl. When did you get that? Pre-battle preparation. Li Ming spun the staff, then drew a rapier, showed it to John, and sheathed it again. I think this will be useful. You remind me of an old friend, John said. Li Ming in a black suit with a scepter rapier made John think of Cain, the blind assassin. Is that so? Li Ming twirled the Gothic scepter twice. Then he must have been terrifying with this. He was, John admitted. If you want to learn, I can ask him to teach you. Li Ming brightened. Do it if you can. Cain was retired, but with John's involvement he might agree. Li Ming pointed toward Knight's Cathedral. Everything over there ready? Ready. Li Ming pulled out a camera and snapped a shot. John raised an eyebrow. Don't be surprised, just a commemorative photo. He handed the camera to a nearby D'Antonio subordinate. After tonight, this church might not exist anymore. Dong, 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 dong. It's 8 o'clock, John said. Punctual. Li Ming looked up as streaks of fire cut across the sky toward the cathedral. He turned to John, baffled. Where did they get armed helicopters? The 2 of them stared at the looming threat as the battle about to erupt finally closed in on them all. Thanks to Yuegu Cheng for the generous support. Thanks to Bookfriend 2904010198533714 for the monthly pass support. Please keep reading. Chapter 63, Church Battle. Boom! Boom! The helicopter's cannons struck the church's outer wall in quick succession, sending bricks and masonry flying. 2 shells tore through the stained glass windows and detonated inside, igniting the furnishings. Whoosh! Whoosh! 2 more rounds came, but this time a translucent shield flared in a window and stopped them. Descend! Wang Hu barked at the pilot, but the helicopter hovered stubbornly. He spun to look at Luo Li. She was controlling the pilot. I can only give simple commands, she said. I can't force him to fly us straight to our deaths. Wang Hu glared. It was obvious who didn't want to die. Do what you're supposed to do. He sneered, took 2 running steps, gathered himself, and leapt from the helicopter. The explosion knocked the chopper, making it tremble and nearly lose stability. Luo Li cursed inwardly. Wang Hu had to have planned it. There was no time to argue. A massive wind blade surged out from the church toward the rotor. Luo Li scrambled the controls, pulling the joystick to change course, but the blade hit too fast. The rotor blades took the blow. The helicopter spun and began to fall. Wang Hu, save me, she shouted into the squad channel, panic in her voice. Wang Hu, already on the ground, gave her only a glance. He seemed not to care whether she lived or died. Boom! Just as he expected, no teammate death notification pinged. He looked down at his battered armor with a tight feeling in his chest. He'd bought it with a lot of points, and now it might be totaled. He shoved the thought away and sprinted toward the church. Now he wore not only the armor, but belts of ammunition. He had grabbed the helicopter's machine gun and began to strafe the ruined facade as he ran. His constitution and strength stats had both been above 70. After triggering his trump card, they shot past 90, giving him almost 10 times a normal human's physical capacity. Carrying hundreds of pounds of gun and ammo felt effortless. 600 rounds barked away and were exhausted. Tossing the gun aside, Wang Hu drew a greatsword from personal space and plunged into the church. The building, already battered by cannon and machine gun fire, was a ruin. The moment he burst inside, a huge fireball slammed down. He rolled to avoid it, but his left arm scorched. Damn, if only Lao Gu were here, he muttered. He had relied on the warlock Lao Gu the most. Lao Gu's sorcery scouted and covered for him, compensating for his own lack of mobility. But Lao Gu was dead now. Fighting the Heaven's Path faction's mage alone would allow him to be kited. Still, Wang Hu had experience against ranged enemies. He could trade wounds for closing distance. He could do it. Then he took in the church's interior and broke out in a cold sweat. Only 3 people remained inside, the mage he'd already fought and 2 others who looked like Reincarnators from the Heaven's Path faction. John Wick and Luciano, reported to have gone in earlier, were nowhere to be seen. Wang Hu's crude combat style belied a sharp mind. He realized immediately they'd been baited. An ambush. He couldn't let his teammates hang back and later realize what had happened. Better to force them out into the open with him. Luo Li, move in now. John Wick's half dead, and that mage is on his last legs. Wang Hu snapped over the team channel, staring at the energetic Hu Feiyang across the room. Hurry, surprise them. Luo Li, not suspecting anything, answered instantly. On my way. In the rear, Li Ming, observing the battle, saw a streak of fire arc through the distant sky. It looked like it came from the seaside. Missiles from a warship? He asked a D'Antonio family manager. The manager, pale, stammered, "It seems like it." He knew this was the work of a Pantheon space reincarnator, the female Pantheon reincarnator who didn't play by the rules. Hu Feiyang had already given him intel. "Get our people moving too, and add more fire support," Li Ming ordered. A tremendous noise erupted behind him as trees were flattened. 5 tanks and 3 artillery vehicles rolled forward. Li Ming smirked. If they were going to break rules, so could he. He raised his radio. Fire! The Navy's missiles detonated near the church, and the fragile structure disintegrated into rubble. Hu Feiyang hunched, his protective shield sputtering away. The missile's power had been brutal. His magic reserves were nearly drained, and his recently healed wounds worsened. A hand touched his shoulder, and warmth spread through him. He turned. Hezhong stood there with a staff, channeling healing. Good timing, Hezhong said. Hu Feiyang straightened, grateful. He glanced over at Wang Hu, still sprawled not far off, breathing hard. Using a tactic that harms 1,000 to hurt 800, if I hadn't specifically recruited a priest for the team, you would have killed me, he said. Are they dead yet? Luo Li's voice crackled over the team channel. Wang Hu drew a breath and tried to sound unbroken. The mage used a life-saving item. They're at the end of it. One more hit, and they're finished. No, the warship's commander has been restrained. I can't control. Who is? Luo Li's voice cut off in the middle, as if something had happened to her. Wang Hu snapped the channel closed in annoyance, thinking it a trick. With unreliable teammates, he decided to finish the job himself. He unleashed the mutation he had been suppressing. His body swelled to 3 meters, muscles bulging, and he lunged to finish the fight. But Luo Li was not faking. She was being targeted. Bang! A shot came from nowhere and struck her leg. She collapsed, and a figure stepped out of the shadows. Luo Li's pupils tightened. John Wick, the mission's target, had escaped their attempt to kill him, and now she herself had become his prey. John didn't waste words. He fired again, this time into her chest, and she went limp. He had heard Li Ming warn that these people had tough bodies. One more shot should stop her without killing her. Satisfied, John picked up his phone and called. Li, he said, the person has been captured, alive. Chapter 64, Joining Forces. Thanks, Jonathan. Put him in a carriage. No one is to approach him, Li Ming ordered. He had kept John alive so he could kill him personally, hoping for valuable drops. To Li Ming, these reincarnators were walking treasure chests. After the missile strike, the church lay in ruins. Before the 2 groups of reincarnators inside could recover, the tanks and artillery vehicles Li Ming had brought opened fire. Anti-aircraft guns on the artillery rigs swept the field, launching indiscriminate strikes. The tanks fired as they closed in, flanking the survivors. Li Ming watched as Wang Hu, the biggest target in the battlefield, was hit by an anti-aircraft round and sent flying. He wasn't dead, but the wound was a bloody mess. Tsk, Li Ming muttered, shaking his head. No wonder they say, wherever anti-aircraft guns appear, the rest is just a military tribunal. Cease fire, cease fire. Someone emerged from the periphery shouting orders. He was dressed in an ostentatious suit, his leather shoes polished to a shine. He didn't look old, and by his side strode Luciano, the current head of the Camorra. Li Ming's eyes narrowed. He recognized the newcomer immediately. Vincent Bisset de Gramont, the villain from John Wick 4. These troops had been supplied by Luciano, so they obeyed when he arrived. The tanks and artillery fell silent, giving the 4 reincarnators in the church a moment to breathe. "Mr. Luciano, who's this?" Li Ming asked. "This is Gramont," Luciano replied, "a marquise appointed by the 12 elders of the High Table." "A High Table elder?" Li Ming raised an eyebrow at Luciano. "Aren't you one?" Santino was dead. Luciano now held considerable power and had grown colder toward Li Ming. Luciano answered, "The High Table bestows on a marquis supreme authority he's specifically responsible for." He trailed off, glancing toward the church. All matters concerning mages and mad scientists. Li Ming understood. So John hadn't violated the High Table's ban, yet Gramont still became a marquise. Clearly the High Table had taken an interest in the supernatural and was using Gramont to probe it. A marquise in name, a pawn of the 12 elders in practice. "This place is under my command now. You may withdraw, intermediate member." Gramont arrogantly snatched the walkie-talkie from Li Ming's hand. He had promised the High Table he would uncover the secret of supernatural powers, and that promise had earned him the Marquis title. Li Ming shrugged and let him take over. He had never wanted to use tanks and cannons to outright kill the reincarnators, only to chew up their remaining strength. If Gramont wanted to play hero, fine. Let him take the desperate counterattacks before the final blows. Li Ming glanced at his reputation. 230,000. At 100,000, the main quest had been rated A. With an extra 130,000, could it reach S rank? Li Ming liked to keep things stable. With the reincarnators causing this huge commotion, should he add fuel to the fire? He watched, waiting for Gramont to act. Under Gramont's orders, the tanks crept toward the ruined church, and assassins began closing in from the sides, sealing a ring around the fighters inside. "Ban Ping!" "All right," Hu Feiyang called, and a reply came over the air. Not long after, the treads on 3 tanks suddenly blew apart. The vehicles were immobilized. The cannons themselves had been stuffed with grenades. When a tank fired, the charge detonated inside, and the gun crews were collateral damage. Strangest of all, no one had approached the tanks to sabotage them. Everything had happened at a distance. Invisibility, Li Ming said to himself. The last one really is a rogue. Among the 4 reincarnators were a biochemical tyrant, a mage, a priest, and one Li Ming had never been able to pin down. Now he realized that the last one's enhancement was stealth. That made Hu Feiyang the biggest threat. A mage should have a high mental attribute. Li Ming worried the Gotham Scepter wouldn't work on him. He quietly sent a message to John on his phone and kept watching Gramont. But Gramont couldn't command for shit. He spoke like he knew tactics, infantry-artillery coordination, crossfire, but when it came to making decisions, he hesitated. After only 2 artillery shots, he ordered a ceasefire, afraid of taking credit if the reincarnators were killed. The invisible operative then disabled the artillery vehicles one by one, neutralizing a major threat. The assassins with small arms were little more than fodder against Wang Hu and Hu Feiyang. Gramont grew frantic. He grabbed a megaphone. "Hey, you're surrounded. If you keep fighting, you'll just die here," he bellowed. "I'm a Marquise of the High Table, supreme authority. Surrender, and I guarantee your safety. Anyone who surrenders first will be spared. The rest will die." Gramont's confident threats carried into the ruins. Hu Feiyang and Wang Hu heard him clearly. "They think they've got us," Hu Feiyang said, exchanging a look with Wang Hu. They both knew they were in a trap. "Our target is John Wick," Wang Hu said first. "The lives of others are irrelevant to me," Hu Feiyang replied in a flat tone. "My points are enough," Wang Hu added. Hu Feiyang's eyes lit up. Wang Hu meant, even if the mission failed, he wouldn't be erased in the space when he returned. He could abandon the mission and live to fight another day. Hu Feiyang understood. "Then, join forces?" Hu Feiyang asked. "Join forces?" Wang Hu grinned fiercely. Gramont was still fantasizing about who would surrender first when a sneer snapped him back to reality. "Idiot," Li Ming said aloud, drawing Gramont's angry glare. "Intermediate member, you should show more respect to a marquise," Gramont snapped. Oh, really? Li Ming smiled. Then I'll remind you of something. What? Gramont demanded. There were 4 people in that church, Li Ming said. Haven't you noticed there are only 3 left? Gramont checked and found Li Ming was right. Remembering how the tanks and artillery had been destroyed, a chilling realization dawned on him. Explosions had occurred along the roads, and their trajectories all pointed toward their present positions. Li Ming shook his head. It still had to be me. And, Li Ming added to the flustered Gramont, what makes you think these people have an irreconcilable grudge? Idiot. Chapter 65. Wizard. Wizard. Gramont had stopped caring about Li Ming's insolence. The battle on the field had shifted in an instant. The mad scientist and the magician who had been about to tear each other apart had somehow joined forces. After Zhang treated him, Wang Hu's combat capability soared. He charged forward through a hail of bullets, slashing down enemies with his broadsword, scooping up their weapons, and unleashing a furious burst of gunfire. It was like watching someone with an invincibility hack in a battle royale. Whenever Wang Hu was driven to the edge of mutation and about to lose himself, He Zhang healed him and snapped him back. Without artillery, no one could stop Wang Hu. He Zhang kept casting across the field. Wind blades, fireballs, lightning, working with Wang Hu to cut a swath through their opponents. There are still missiles on the warship, one of the captains shouted. 1 salvo and we can wipe them out. Luciano's face went white. He wanted those supernatural threats gone as much as anyone, but destroying the Reincarnators by missile would ruin their mission. It would close the one chance they had just opened to reach something greater. No, he said. We can't use the missiles. Gramont shot him a look. You, a junior member. His glare fell to Li Ming, who was standing casually at the edge of the group. Gramont's memory flipped back to the museum, to the time Li Ming and John had repelled Wang Hu. He barked orders anyway. Where is John Wick? Find Wick and gather everyone here. You only need to hold them off. Just us. Li Ming's tone was blandly amused. He understood perfectly. Gramont was treating him and John as expendable shields. Sacrifice them while reinforcements arrived, then decide. It was a sensible plan. If they couldn't capture the Reincarnators now, at least they could force a retreat and try again later. If you want us to die for you, say so plainly, Li Ming said. I'm a marquise appointed by the High Table, Gramont snapped back. I have authority over you. Are you refusing the High Table's orders? Gramont assumed the threat of the High Table would cow a man who'd had the nerve to call him an idiot. But Li Ming didn't blink. He raised an eyebrow. So I have no choice then? Of course you can comply, Gramont continued. Complete the mission and, exceptionally, I'll promote you to senior member. Before anyone could react, Li Ming fired a shot. It hit Gramont in the thigh with a sharp crack. Li, don't be impulsive. Luciano jumped forward, not to save Gramont, but because he didn't want Li Ming going on a rampage and taking him down too. The methods used in the Continental Hotel incident, Wang Hu's sudden berserk frenzy, matched those of the wizard they'd suspected. Li Ming had never shown much reverence for the High Table's rules. He'd only been left alone because both the mad scientist and the magician had been so terrifying that even the High Table hadn't pursued him. I wanted to talk to you like a normal person, Li Ming said, calm and cold. But I didn't expect you to be so arrogant. Then, to the stunned silence of everyone present, Li Ming reached out with his left hand and plucked a gray-black scepter from thin air. It appeared out of nowhere, gothic and ornate, clicking into his grip. Eyes widened. Even Gramont, winded and hovering on the edge of consciousness, fell quiet. So that's it. He's a wizard. Luciano's voice was a mix of disbelief and excitement. The supernatural power the High Table had been hunting was now standing right in front of him. This can't be. The High Table tracks you from birth. How could you be a transcendent? He demanded. A transcendent's abilities are beyond what you imagine, Li Ming said with a faint smile. Luciano had to swallow hard. He believed it, and what Li Ming said next made the room colder. You called us arrogant, Li Ming went on. Wang Hu killed over 200 of your people in 2 days. Now there are 4 transcendents on the field. How much will the High Table have to pay to capture them? Luciano's silence was all the answer he needed. Li Ming leaned on the scepter, almost playful. A handful of transcendents have thrown your assassin world into chaos. Tell me, if the transcendent world were to mobilize in full force, can you stop them? Li Ming asked, and Luciano's face crumpled. The transcendent world? Impossible, Luciano blurted. The High Table controlled almost everything. If a transcendent world existed, they would know. There's nothing impossible about it, Li Ming replied. Transcendents have always existed outside the main world, with their own systems. You simply haven't discovered them. Do you really think there are only a few transcendents and they fell from the sky? Luciano had to admit there was logic in it. He pressed instead, pointing toward the rampage of Wang Hu. Why now? Why emerge? With the development of technology in the main world, Li Ming said, the space where transcendents can operate has been shrinking. Many of the younger transcendents resent being boxed in. They can't accept that their individual strength is so far above ordinary people while their freedom is so restricted. He left the motive hanging. So your arrival isn't accidental? Luciano realized, anger flaring. You're instigating war. Li Ming shook his head. No, it's them, he said. And if I were trying to start a war, do you think I'd tell you about it? Luciano let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Then he tried another angle. The High Table controls most of the world's military power. Even if individual transcendents are strong, we have missiles, satellites, nuclear weapons. We can prepare. Li Ming's smile widened. Do you really believe that when war breaks out, those weapons will stay under your control? He let the words settle. The warship that had just opened fire was still tied to the shore. If transcendents could influence minds, they could corrupt captains, crews, even automated systems. Luciano and Gramont both went pale. But we can fight back, Luciano said through gritted teeth. Even if you can control minds, you can't control every superweapon. That's true, Li Ming conceded with a clap. Which is exactly why war is a terrible option for everyone who isn't ready to watch the world burn. If war breaks out between the transcendents and the main world, the only guarantee is ruin. The High Table may collapse. 99% of those who keep the world running could die. Those in the transcendent world who have any foresight don't want a war. What I wonder is, what does the High Table want? He let the question hang in the smoky air as the field outside continued to burn and thunder. The choice was stark. Continue ruling the world and risk everything, or pursue transcendent power and reduce the world to ash. Thanks to Bagabaga Wulusai and Mo Bingtu for their monthly votes. Thanks. Chapter 66, Trapped to Death. Even Gramont, who had been the most eager to capture the extraordinary, finally gave up. He had always pursued power, and if the High Table collapsed, he would have nothing left. How do you plan to stop the war? Luciano asked, his expression shifting between light and shadow. He, too, had abandoned any hope of gaining ethereal power. For such a slim possibility, the price demanded was too high. The High Table knew how to pick its battles. Whether extraordinaries existed was secondary. What mattered was whether the High Table controlled everything. Kill them, Li Ming said with a smile. I'll do it myself as an example. You. Alone? Enough. Li Ming had been using the Gotham Scepter to judge distances. With the battlefield threat cleared, Hu Feiyang, Wang Hu, and the other two were rushing toward him. Ban Ping, the invisible one and the most fragile of the four, had fallen back, not daring to expose himself. Oh, I have a suggestion for you all. As they closed, Li Ming turned to Luciano and the others. What? Run! Before Luciano could react, he was yanked back. Several cars screeched up behind them, and a gang wearing gas masks poured out, hurling metal canisters forward. Li Ming snapped on a gas mask of his own, produced a detonator, and pressed it. Bang! Bang! All the canisters exploded, and a sheet of green smoke rolled across the field. John, we're even. No problem, Hugo. At the edge of the battlefield, after Hugo ordered his gang forward, he called John. Because of Li Ming, the two original antagonists had buried the hatchet and worked together again. Poison gas, too naive, Hu Feiyang sneered. He thrust his staff forward, and a faint barrier shimmered into being, enclosing the four reincarnators and keeping the gas out. But Li Ming had already accounted for that. He tapped the ground lightly with the Gotham Scepter. A green light screen, visible only to him, spread outward from his position. Skill activated, Wrath of Gotham, targeting the four reincarnators. Humph! Roar! Ah! Hu Feiyang's barrier shattered instantly. All four inhaled the contents of the Viper concoction Li Ming had deployed. Wang Hu flipped his berserk mutation on and sent the priest He Zhong flying with a punch. He Zhong, no longer timid or afraid of dying, grabbed his staff and smashed Ban Ping's head. Hu Feiyang abandoned all magely composure and joined the brawl in close quarters. But in a fistfight, none of them could match Wang Hu. Over 3 meters tall in his mutated form, he attacked like a wrecking machine, treating the others like chicks. The Viper potion, however, began to take effect. It rapidly burned calcium in the body to grant explosive strength, but once all the calcium was depleted, the user would literally liquefy into a puddle of mud. Li Ming wasn't certain how it would interact with Wang Hu, but the 3 Heaven's Path Reincarnators were all fragile enough that the potion would devastate them. Fueled by the Viper, the 3 focused on the biggest threat, Wang Hu, driven by instinct and unafraid of injury. For a time, the 2 sides were roughly equal. Luciano watched from a distance as Li Ming, scepter in hand, shrouded in green smoke, seemed like a god among men. With a single wave, he had turned 4 dangerous reincarnators into beasts tearing at one another. The fight grew brutal. Wang Hu had the upper hand physically, but the Viper ravaged their bones. Crack! Ban Ping struck Wang Hu's waist, then his arm snapped under him. Calcium loss spread like a signal. Hu Feiyang and He Zhong began to suffer fractures. Within 3 minutes, one of He Zhong's legs was ruined, and Hu Feiyang's arms were torn off. Ban Ping, however, was worse off. Savage decay spread through him faster than through the others. Li Ming fired a single shot to claim the kill. He had learned from Lao Gu that a target driven mad by the Gotham Scepter might not be credited as his kill if someone else finished them. He needed the confirmation. Ding, killed an enemy reincarnator, plus 1,000 points. Obtained item, Blade of Cunning. Blade of Cunning, normal, type, weapon. Holder, Li Ming effect, agility +2, cannot be upgraded. Li Ming examined the newly acquired weapon. It was a 50-centimeter crooked knife, no match in feel for the Gotham Scepter, but the attribute mattered. His agility had already reached 20, and the blade's bonus stacked with the Scepter's. Thud, Hu Feiyang was driven to the ground. Half his skull caved in, but even as the Viper ravaged him, his high mental attributes kept him clinging to life. He gasped and opened his eyes to find Ban Ping dead and He Zhong crawling toward Wang Hu, both of his legs broken and gnawed at by desperation. Wang Hu had mutated into something grotesque, immobile under the weight of his flesh and shattered bones. From where he lay, Hu Feiyang could make out the only other standing figure, a man in a gas mask and a custom suit holding an ornate cane, Li Ming. Although the mask hid his face, Hu Feiyang recognized him instantly. The carnage on the field was clearly orchestrated by this man. In mission worlds, reincarnators were often called demons, but in Hu Feiyang's mind, Li Ming was now a demon king. He also noticed the Blade of Cunning in Li Ming's hand and assumed the weapon had been picked up from the fallen. Despair settled in. 2 of Reincarnation Space's most powerful factions had been neutralized by a native of this mission world. Li Ming had seen Hu Feiyang stir, so he didn't store the knife in his personal space. He wasn't about to leave any loose ends. The 3 remaining combatants no longer posed any threat. Even Wang Hu was beyond saving. Li Ming stepped forward confidently. Bang! Hu Feiyang died. Ding! Killed an enemy reincarnator. Obtained item, Tear of the Goddess. Li Ming wasn't taking chances. What if Hu Feiyang had a last-ditch self-destruct spell? While He Zhong and Wang Hu were still under the effect of Wrath of Gotham, Li Ming fired again to finish He Zhong, then emptied a dozen rounds into Wang Hu's head. Even that did not stop him. Li Ming spent 1 point to exchange for a high-power grenade he had previously analyzed, fearing the Gotham Gear's explosives might be insufficient. He pulled the pin and shoved the grenade into Wang Hu's open mouth as he tried to bite him. Boom. Killed an enemy reincarnator. Obtained item, Small Life Potion. Ding. Killed an enemy reincarnator. Obtained item, T103 Tyrant Serum Residue. The steady stream of system prompts in his ear made Li Ming feel exhilarated. Ah, that feels good. Thanks to Scarlet for the monthly support. Comments have been a bit scarce lately. Please leave some if you enjoyed it. Thank you. Chapter 67, Bountiful Harvest. Luciano and Gramont waited a long time before they dared return to the ruined church. By then, Li Ming had already gathered all the valuables left behind by the Reincarnators. There weren't many. Hu Feiyang's staff, He Zhong's staff, a necklace from Ban Ping, and one item remained, Wang Hu's great saber. Li Ming tried to lift it, but with his current strength of 18, he couldn't budge the blade. Seeing Luciano and the other man approach, Li Ming's eyes flicked. An idea came to him. Li, Your Excellency Li Ming. Luciano noticed the great saber too, and his eyes brightened. Since you can't carry it, why don't we help you deal with it? Li Ming shook his head. We can't leave an enemy's main weapons lying around. Luciano looked disappointed, but didn't press it. Still, I need your help clearing the battlefield, and then I want you to store the saber for me for now. No problem, Gramont answered at once, eager and almost gushing. All his old arrogance had gone. He was desperate to bank favors and score credit wherever he could. Luciano glanced at him but said nothing. I'll be on leave for 2.5 months, Li Ming added. When it's time, deliver it to the Continental Hotel in New York for me. Empty promises, Li Ming thought. Get someone to do the work and let them feel thanked. He was getting better at it. Li Ming finally took time to examine his spoils. Quality, excellent. Type gem. Holder, Li Ming effect. Can store 360 units of energy. Can be upgraded. He had seen a version of this before in his previous life. It was similar to the in-game item, a storage gem. He didn't currently have any energy to fill it, so he couldn't tell how valuable a unit was yet, but it was a solid item. Small life potion was straightforward, restores a small amount of vitality. He was more intrigued by the weakened version T-103 Tyrant Bloodline Remnant Fluid. Wang Hu's power had shown him the value of bloodlines, and the Tyrant Bloodline's after-effects had been terrifyingly when the strain exceeded tolerance. Uncontrollable mutation followed. This was Li Ming's first brush with any bloodline relic. Curiosity won out. Weakened version T-1 Blind Remnant Fluid. Quality, excellent. Type, bloodline item holder, Li Ming effect. A complete item grants the weakened version T-103 Tyrant Bloodline. This remnant fluid does not. The amount is too small for immediate use. Li Ming dropped the remnant fluid into the analysis interface. Analyzing, 0.1%. It could be analyzed. If analysis could process it, maybe he could recover a bloodline through analysis, though the progress crawled and stalled at 0.1%. Li Ming wasn't in a hurry. He left it there to be processed slowly. Next, he inspected the equipment he'd picked up. Quality, excellent. Type, weapon. Effect, Spirit +5, casting speed 10%. Can be upgraded. Not bad. But Li Ming discovered a problem. When he held both the Blade of Cunning and the Light Feather Staff, only the Spirit attribute changed, suggesting that only one item of the same equipment type could provide its stat bonus. Weapon Master had been nerfed. Of course, the Blade of Cunning's sharpness remained, only the stacked stat bonus was suppressed. He Zhong's staff was mediocre. Quality, normal. Type weapon, effect Spirit +2, can be upgraded. He didn't mind. More equipment was never a bad thing, and if he couldn't use it, he could trade it. Finally, Ban Ping's necklace. Quality, normal, type necklace, effect Constitution +1, Agility +1, can be upgraded. Li Ming put the necklace on without hesitation. He noticed that the items picked up from the ground didn't show an owner, probably because they hadn't yet been certified by the space. He suddenly remembered he'd missed someone. After confirming the location with John, he went straight there. John wasn't alone. Winston was with him. Winston and John were chatting when Li Ming arrived, Winston joking about how Li Ming once made gangs fight each other by using magic, and John pretending he'd taken it seriously. "Jonathan?" Winston called. "Here," John replied. Li Ming joined them, and John handed him a detonator, pointing to a minivan. "The last Reincarnator is inside." Luo Li was in a complete panic. In less than 30 minutes, she had gone from ambusher to ambushed, captured, and witnessed her strongest teammate, Wang Hu, killed. She braced herself, convinced John would make some use of her, and she prepared to trigger a charm spell on whoever opened the door. But Li Ming had no intention of getting close. He pressed the detonator. Boom. Ding. You have killed a hostile spatial reincarnator and gained 1,000 points. Obtained item, Mission Failure Exemption Voucher 1. Li Ming's intuition told him the voucher was valuable. Quality, legendary, type, item holder, Li Ming effect. After a main mission fails, one penalty can be exempted. As expected of reincarnators, there was always a backup plan. John looked at the burning minivan. Li Ming nodded. John smiled and said, "You can build yourself a new house, Jonathan." The remark was light, half a joke, but it fit the mood, thorough, decisive, and final. Afterward, Li Ming fell back into the rhythm of Gotham. He spent his days pestering John to teach him combat skills, and when John wasn't available, he practiced shooting on his own. Diligence became his focus. After a month of steady training, John brought him a surprise instructor, Kane, also called Master Yi with a gun, a top assassin whose skill with both cane and firearm once overwhelmed John in their past encounters. If Kane hadn't blinded himself to retire, his presence would have tipped the scales. So Li Ming gained another master. What about reputation? As the only transcendent in this world, that was not a concern. Reputation. 2.5 months flew by, and Li Ming finally eased off the grueling daily drills. With John and Cassian's relentless instruction, his attribute panel had changed dramatically. Strength, Constitution, 14. Skills, Fighting, level of 0.8, Shooting level of 7, Firearms Mastery level of 6, John Wick Combat Template 5, Staff Sword Mastery of 4. Items, Gotham Scepter, Tear of the Goddess, Yellowed Necklace. Points, if he equipped the Gotham Scepter, the Yellowed Necklace, and the Blade of Cunning, his stats would jump even more. Constitution, Agility, Spirit, 15. Fully armed, Li Ming could now go toe-to-toe with John and even nudge ahead under the right circumstances. Without all the gear, John's experience would still give him the edge, but only just. "Lee, will you come back?" John asked at the entrance of the Continental Hotel, holding the lively Daisy. Cassian, Winston, Luciano, and even Gramont stood nearby. Li Ming hesitated. The assassin world wasn't his alone. Unlike Gotham, there was no guarantee of a return. After this farewell, he might never see any of them again. He also remembered Jin Cassian's cold threat. He'd promised to kill him and John, and decided that was John's problem to handle. "I'm not sure," he said finally, "but for your sake, it's better if we don't meet again." He meant it. Another reunion would mean another mission, and next time there might be other reincarnators who weren't as easy to talk to. Li Ming clapped the pickup's door to shake off the melancholy. The truck was packed with military supplies and Wang Hu's massive sword. Alloy saber quality, normal, type, weapon. Trait, sturdy, composed of various metals with trace amounts of secondary adamantium alloy, greatly increasing durability. This saber confers no attribute bonuses, but its sturdy trait makes it a valuable study item. Current holder cannot wield it. Ding, this item has a spatial imprint and cannot be analyzed. There was no bypass for that restriction. It seemed the weakened T-103 Tyrant Blood Evolution Fluid Wang Hu had swapped from space hadn't come directly through the space, which was why it could be analyzed. The saber, however, had a spatial imprint. If trade failed, the only use for the saber might be as an improvised shield. Li Ming slid into the driver's seat, and the space pinged just then. Ding, mission countdown has ended. Teleportation gate opening. A blue, swirling gate opened directly in front of the pickup. Everyone held their breath, especially Gramont, who stared at the portal with hungry eyes. They'd been studying the saber for over 2 months with no way to chip off a sample, though there had been progress analyzing Wang Hu's corpse. Li Ming ignored the lookers-on and nodded to John. "Jonathan." "Li," John replied. The nods were short, final. Li Ming drove into the gate. As the pickup approached, it expanded, swallowing the entire vehicle. In an instant, the assassin world vanished in a flash of light, and he arrived back in the familiar, pure white space. Because of his smuggling privilege, all the items on the truck were automatically stashed in his personal space without authentication, even the pickup itself. Scanning. Scan complete. Reincarnator is not injured, no treatment required. Main mission, Assassin's Path completed. Current reputation, 5 Betrayals 6. Main mission evaluation S. Reward, 2,000 points, 5 free attribute points, Abyss Gold Coin as 1. An S rank, as expected. The special reward caught his eye. Abyss Gold Coin quality, mythical, type special item, consumable. Effect, can upgrade one Abyss privilege once. Mythical quality. Li Ming blinked, then realized it was a consumable. Still, the effect was huge. He immediately thought of the Continental's golden coin that buys one service. This Abyss gold coin felt like a darker imitation from the Abyss itself. He'd assumed it might be a powerful equipment piece like the Gotham Scepter, but the assassin world wasn't Gotham, prestige and all. His current Abyss privileges were return, analysis, and smuggling. Which to upgrade? Return wasn't urgent. He still hadn't found a cure for his mother and planned to search the reincarnation space where he had enough points to trade for treatments. Smuggling worked well enough. Analysis, though, was the most useful right now and could use improvement. He opened the analysis interface. The weakened T103 Tyrant blood evolution fluid he'd thrown in before had already been analyzed. He tried to exchange for it. Exchange quantity 100, required points 2,000. Do you wish to exchange? The fluid available was residual, so exchanging 100 portions would get him roughly the complete residual amount. He had the points. After the mission reward, his total was well over 40,000, so he confirmed the exchange. After merging the portions, the description updated. Weakened version T103 Tyrant blood evolution fluid quality, fine. Type bloodline item holder, Li Ming. Effect, allows the user to obtain the weakened version T103 Tyrant bloodline with a possibility of mutation. Note, this bloodline is exclusive. Use with caution. It may conflict with existing bloodlines. Li Ming's mental hierarchy of item qualities ran normal, fine, excellent, epic, legendary, mythical. The Tyrant bloodline's boost was tempting, but he hesitated. He wasn't an ordinary Reincarnator who'd jump at every strength boost. If the Tyrant bloodline was exclusive, using it might lock him out of acquiring other bloodlines later. He didn't want to cap his potential so early. He was convinced there were other ways to obtain bloodlines, perhaps exchanges in the reincarnation space. Besides, he had VIP status in the Abyss space. If he upgraded analysis correctly, he could mitigate the risk. Abyss, what happens if I upgrade the analysis privilege? He asked. Ding, the direction of privilege upgrade can be specified by the Reincarnator. Li Ming grinned. I want to use the Abyss gold coin to upgrade analysis. Upgrade direction, analyze bloodlines. He paused and added two cautious constraints, thinking of the Tyrant fluid. The analyzed bloodlines must have no side effects and must not conflict with existing bloodlines. There was a moment of tense silence. Then the Abyss replied. Ding, privilege has been upgraded, fulfilling the Reincarnator's requirements. Abyss privilege, analysis, exclusive privilege. Effect 1, can analyze knowledge learned by the Reincarnator and convert it into skills. Effect 2, can analyze physical objects. Once analysis is complete, they can be exchanged for points at any time. Effect 3, can analyze items containing bloodlines and convert them into one's own bloodline. Li Ming let out a breath he hadn't known he'd been holding. It was done. Chapter 69, Return to Reincarnation Space. Li Ming immediately put the weakened version T103 Tyrant blood evolution fluid back into analysis, analyzing 0.1 cent. The analysis crawled along, but Li Ming wasn't surprised. He still had 5 free attribute points. As usual, he put 1 into strength and 2 into constitution, bringing both to 20. The remaining 2 he put into spirit, raising it to 16. Ding! Due to the Reincarnator's excellent performance, you have been specially promoted to Abyss Favored 1. You receive a 50% discount on purchases within Abyss Space. Abyss Space? Li Ming echoed. Ding! Abyss Space is the gathering place for this space's reincarnators. Reincarnation Space is the public hub for all reincarnators. The first return location is Reincarnation Space. Subsequent returns can be switched freely between Reincarnation Space and Abyss Space. Li Ming understood. This was the difference between a guild channel and a world channel in a game. A 50% discount was a generous perk. He guessed the Abyss was satisfied with him wiping out the Reincarnators in the Pantheon and Heaven's Path factions on Assassin World, hence the reward. He didn't need the discount right now, though. With the settlement finished, another prompt from the Abyss arrived. Abyss Favored 1, please choose. 1. Return to Reincarnation Space. 2. Return to the original world. Return to Reincarnation Space, he chose quickly. The teleportation portal has been activated. Next world mission countdown, 30 days. Abyss reminder, please do not reveal your identity casually. Li Ming stepped into the portal. The same dazzling sensation washed over him, and when he opened his eyes, he was standing on a vast circular platform. People materialized around him and then wandered out along paved paths in a daze. Above and beyond the platform, countless stars crowded the sky, each one hinting at a mission world connected to reincarnation space. "Hey, newcomer," a voice called out, cutting into his thoughts. A middle-aged man with a greasy smile and a full beard was waving him over, like a hawker persuading passers-by. "Newcomers, come this way." Li Ming scanned the plaza. There were plenty of reincarnators like this man, each offering guidance, services, or recruitment. He started toward him. The space had already reminded him that reincarnation space was a safe zone. No spells, no attacks, so there was no danger in listening. The bearded man introduced himself with a grin. "Name's Dazuo, sent by reincarnation space to brief newcomers on the basics. What's your name, brother?" "Wang Hu," Li Ming answered, using an alias. In mission worlds, implanted identities made hiding impossible, but here he could choose a name. "Brother Wang, come with me." Dazuo led him along a smaller footpath down from the newcomer plaza toward a row of impressive buildings. He pointed at the nearest. "That's the exchange center. Most items can be exchanged there. Some factions or spaces have exclusive exchange items. You have to go to their specific space for those." Li Ming's eyes latched onto the exchange center. This might be where he could find a cure for his mother. Dazuo asked casually, "So, which space are you from?" The question put Li Ming on guard. He deliberately pointed at the building next to the exchange center without answering. "What's that?" Seeing his refusal to answer, Dazuo thought, another smart one. He still smiled and said, "That's the enhancement hall. You can enhance bloodlines, equipment, and so on there." Dazuo continued, "Reincarnation space is huge, with lots of facilities. For newcomers, the most important are exchange, enhancement, and teaming up." Teaming up? Li Ming remembered how the reincarnators in Assassin World had all entered in teams. Dazuo nodded. A newcomer's first worlds are the simplest and safest. You're not expected to clear other mission worlds alone. He sounded almost amused. Teams can have up to 5 members. There are temporary teams and fixed teams. How do they differ? Temporary teams have no fixed location. You just find teammates and confirm with the space. They get basic functions, unified missions, and a team chat. Fixed teams are much stronger. They have a team space, a shared warehouse, and can share equipment and items. But fixed teams require special items to form. Those aren't easy for ordinary reincarnators to get. That explained why the two groups from Assassin World had been operating as temporary teams and why they'd betrayed each other so casually. "You'll also want to check out Eden," Dazuo added, gesturing to the largest building in the space. "It's where reincarnators rest and entertain themselves. Lots of people recruit teammates there." Dazuo then moved on to the basic rules. Mission worlds come in 2 types, normal and faction confrontation. After every 3 normal worlds, there's a faction confrontation, competing against reincarnators from other factions. "How many factions are there here?" Li Ming asked. That would determine how many potential enemies he might face. The major ones are Heaven's Path, Pantheon, Hero, Main God, Legend, Heaven, Hell, and Central Continent, 8 in total, Dazuo listed. Li Ming swallowed. "Are there smaller factions besides those?" "Yes," Dazuo nodded. "New factions pop up all the time. Often they're eventually broken apart and absorbed by one of the 8 majors." "Factions can be broken up?" Li Ming zeroed in on the implication. "Right. Factions are collections of spaces, and they compete with one another. It's a big fish eats small fish world." Li Ming thought about the Abyss's cautious stance. If the Abyss wasn't even a medium player, it could be only a tiny force, or worse, an isolated one. He didn't have enough information yet to judge, but one thing was clear. Reincarnation space likely held many of his enemies. "What about relationships between those major factions?" he asked. Dazuo laughed and then fell silent. "That's not part of the newcomer briefing, 200 points. He feigned a stern expression. Li Ming shook his head. "Forget it." Dazuo paused, then his smile returned. Newcomers who were sharp lived longer here, and cultivating relationships was an investment. "All right, fine. I wasn't going to charge you anyway. It's not really a secret." He waved a hand and ushered Li Ming onward through the crowd, toward the exchange center and the endless opportunities and dangers that branched out from reincarnation space. Chapter 70. May you encounter the abyss unexpectedly. The heavenly Tao, the main god, heaven, and the central continent factions are a little closer to each other. Although they don't go easy on each other during opposing missions, they usually leave a way for opposing reincarnators to survive, Dazuo said. But relations between other factions are much bloodier. When the heaven and hell factions meet, their missions almost always demand total annihilation of the opponent. Li Ming blinked and asked, "What exactly are the factions fighting for?" "The mission worlds." Dazuo gave him a look that said he was still green. "What do you think we reincarnators are for?" "Our purpose is to help the factions fight over mission worlds inside the reincarnation space." A mission world is like a movie. Reincarnators are often dropped into the story at a critical point. When a reincarnator completes the main mission, they've helped their space invade that world's origin. I've heard it from other veteran reincarnators. The factions are vying for control over mission worlds, but I don't know much beyond that. Dazuo trailed off, but it was enough for Li Ming to grasp the basic rules of the reincarnation space. How did the reincarnation space come to be? Li Ming asked, curiosity getting the better of him. How would I know? That's not for us to worry about. We only need to worry about surviving 5 mission worlds, Dazuo grumbled. What happens if you survive 5 worlds? You should have noticed the countdown to the next mission is 30 days, right? Li Ming nodded. No matter whether the mission succeeds or fails, once you've been through 5 worlds, the interval between missions can be extended to a year. Dazuo's voice turned enticing. And if you pass 9 mission worlds, you won't be forced into missions anymore. Surviving 5 missions meant a reincarnator had already taken part in at least one faction confrontation. If they didn't die, their faction had effectively realized their value. Unlike Li Ming, who already knew the plots of some mission worlds, most reincarnators enter worlds completely clueless and have to learn fast. By then, they're seasoned. Factions won't push them as hard and will give them more time to grow. If a reincarnator failed a mission but wasn't killed, they paid a heavy price to avoid punishment. Usually a large portion of their gains from earlier worlds went back to the faction. Either way, the faction didn't lose out. Li Ming, who'd experienced being used before, understood the mechanics well. Surviving 9 worlds meant a second major confrontation. Those who were still alive by then were treated as elites and no longer forced into missions. Factions preferred to motivate such elites with incentives instead of coercion. Li Ming knew these methods intimately. He'd used the same approach with Penguin. Were the 8 major factions always the strongest in the space? Li Ming asked. No, I heard there used to be 9. Dazuo's eyes fixed on him. During my last faction confrontation mission, I heard an experienced reincarnator say that long ago there was a faction called the Abyss. He watched Li Ming carefully for a reaction. Li Ming only looked curious, so Dazuo relaxed and continued. You must have felt the faction effect in the initial mission world, right? Yes. Each faction has different faction effects. The Abyss's effect is perfect identity implantation. Do you know how terrifying that is? Dazuo sighed. No. The biggest initial problem for reincarnators entering a mission world is not having a believable identity. That usually draws suspicion or hostility. The Abyss's faction effect gives you a flawless identity right from the start, Dazuo explained. That's strong? Then why are there only 8 spaces now? Li Ming asked. It was targeted, of course. Dazuo's voice dropped. That veteran told me the Abyss was just too strong, so the 8 major factions ganged up on it. Now only the Abyss Space headquarters remains. Li Ming's intuition told him the Abyss hadn't been attacked for only one reason. There had to be more to it. But that wasn't something he could press Dazuo about. These things are secrets. Most reincarnators only know the Abyss existed, Dazuo added. Besides, the Abyss was really popular in faction confrontation missions. If you encountered it, the mission was almost destined to succeed. It's just a pity reincarnators from the Abyss faction haven't appeared in the reincarnation space for a long time, he said with a hint of regret. Among us, there's a common blessing. May you encounter the Abyss unexpectedly. It's a wish for a pleasant surprise. Li Ming smiled inwardly. The name and its reputation had become a sort of blessing among reincarnators, although it almost sounded disrespectful to the abyss itself. A fish-headed person drifted past them. Li Ming suppressed the urge to stare and asked, "Are all reincarnators human?" Reincarnators come from many worlds. A very small number are other races, but 99% are human. Most mission worlds are human-centered. Though some spaces are peculiar, Dazuo shrugged. Can other reincarnators drop into a mission midway? Li Ming thought of the assassin world. In faction confrontation missions, yes, the space will give a prompt at the start, indicating when other reincarnators will descend, Dazuo said. What about ordinary missions? Or no prompt? How would that happen? Dazuo exclaimed. I've never heard of it. The abyss is unusual, yes, but that's different. Changing topics, Dazuo clammed up when Li Ming pretended to ask casually about the other faction's effects. He went on to tell Li Ming other common knowledge until the new reincarnator guidance ended. So you were working? Li Ming asked, curious. New reincarnator guidance, 200 points per session. Dazuo smiled. The reincarnation space doesn't lack food or clothes, but points are always welcome. Li Ming added Dazuo as a space friend, and remembering the blessing, said as he left, May you encounter the abyss unexpectedly. Dazuo froze for a second. Li Ming had already turned away and headed straight for the exchange center. Apart from Eden, the exchange center was the busiest place in the space, but inside it was surprisingly empty. Li Ming stood alone in front of a huge light screen that displayed every redeemable item in the reincarnation space. He searched for medicines that could cure cancer. Instantly, the screen filled with options. Some of the top items were mythical-level relics that listed cancer treatment as only a side effect, and their prices, often in the millions, were far beyond his reach. He resorted to sorting the list by points from low to high. One item caught his eye. Gastric cancer cure potion. Normal. Type consumable. Effect. Can treat gastric cancer. Exchange price 2,000. Li Ming let out a long breath. The heavy burden he had carried for so long finally began to lift. Li Ming wasn't in a hurry to buy. He checked the price, then opened the trading interface on the light screen. The exchange interface handled trades within the reincarnation space itself. The trading interface was where reincarnators traded with one another. The space charged a 5% handling fee on items sold through the trading interface. There were items that could cure stomach cancer, but they either had side effects or were higher quality and more expensive. Reincarnators didn't have to worry about ordinary illnesses. Upon returning home, they could spend points to directly cure most conditions. But still, Li Ming bought the stomach cancer cure potion anyway. It was a green potion in a glass vial. He stored it in his personal space and kept filtering for items that could strengthen the body. He wasn't looking for himself. He could improve himself with his analysis privilege, but for his parents. Only after taking care of them could he explore the reincarnation space with peace of mind. After a careful search, he found a promising item, the Xuanyuan pill. Quality? Excellent. Type consumable. Effect: bathes the user's body in spiritual energy, restoring health and extending the lifespan of ordinary people by 50 to 100 years. Exchange price, 5,000 longevity. Li Ming's first thought was that he'd bought too soon. The space wanted 5,000 points. But then he checked the trading interface and found the same pill selling for only 3,000. He bought two at that price, spending another 6,000 points. After those purchases, he had 16,999 points left. Now he could plan for himself. What should he exchange points for to increase his combat strength? Cultivation techniques, equipment, bloodlines, or supernatural powers? He figured bloodlines were the most cost-effective overall, granting special abilities and boosting physical attributes. But since he had analysis, he didn't need to buy them. Bloodlines would likely be expensive anyway. He looked up a specific item. Search, weakened version T103 Tyrant Blood Evolution Fluid. The result, weakened version T103 Tyrant Blood Evolution Fluid. Exchange price 6,000. There was also a weakened version T103 Tyrant Bloodline at 8,000. The evolution fluid required self-injection and carried the risk of unknown mutations, Buying the bloodline directly was safer because the space would provide a complete and secure service. Of course, there was the full-strength T103 Tyrant bloodline at an even higher price. On the trading interface, however, only evolution fluid showed up. There were only 3 units, and the cheapest was 5,800, just 200 points cheaper than the space's exchange price. Bloodlines really were rare. Ming felt a stir of opportunity. He took out an evolution fluid he had previously obtained using his analysis privilege, one he'd exchanged for with residual fluid, and tried to sell it on the trading interface. A prompt appeared, "Please enter price." It could be sold. Ming was elated. He had used analysis and gotten that evolution fluid for only 2,000 points. If he could sell it for 5,800, he'd make a profit. The thought of exchanging many evolution fluids and reselling them flashed through his mind. Then the analysis interface grayed out. A notice said analysis was not available in the reincarnation space. Ming sighed. He was disappointed, but not surprised. Analysis was a privilege granted by the Abyss. It was fine to use in his own domain, but not for blatant exploitation of the reincarnation space's marketplace. And the space's authority should rightly supersede faction privileges. "Okay," he told himself. "I'll stock up a batch of goods in that pure white space when I return, then come back here to sell them." He remembered the pile of spoils he'd taken from other reincarnators and pulled them out of his personal space. These items couldn't be analyzed with his ability, but they could be sold. An oak staff, for example, traded for 1,000 points in the space and sold back to the space for 700. Someone on the trading interface was offering 850. Ming sold it to that individual. Sale successful, obtained 807 points. It was clearly 807.5, and they didn't even round up. "What a cheapskate," he muttered. As for Wang Hu's broadsword, he'd expected it to be worth a lot more than the staff, but the space's top offer was only 1,100, mainly because it was sturdy. Other weapons of the same type went for around 600. Equipment that granted attribute bonuses was more popular. Ming checked shields. Sturdy shields were all above 1,000, so he decided to keep the broadsword and use it as a makeshift shield. After the sale, his balance stood at 17,806 points, a hefty sum. He could have bought a dozen attribute-adding pieces of equipment without duplicates, but the space's items of the same type didn't stack attributes, so if he bought anything, he'd choose quality over quantity. His combat skills were adequate for close combat and firearms, but he lacked supernatural methods. Apart from the abilities that came with the Gotham Scepter, he had no magic or sorcery to speak of. Physical fitness could be improved too, but bloodlines generally handled that, so he didn't rush. He opened the cultivation technique interface. A long list scrolled by: North Profound Divine Art, 18 Dragon Subduing Palms, 6 Meridian Divine Swords, Source Power Analysis. Exchanging for a cultivation technique felt less cost-effective. Internal energy and similar arts took years of practice. Compared to the direct evolution of bloodlines, they weren't efficient. Different systems could also conflict. Magic and ninjutsu, for example, might not be compatible. With analysis, he could probably reconcile different systems, but he still hesitated. He wondered aloud, is there an energy that's compatible with every system? The light screen replied almost immediately. Source power, quality, mythical, type, energy system, effect. After exchange, the user gains source power. All other energies are converted into source power. Compatible with all energy systems with no adverse effects. Exchange price, 10,000 time. This was exactly what he wanted. With source power, he could cultivate multiple systems at once without conflict. Immortal arts, demonic arts, everything. It was tempting. He'd long wanted to use spells. That was precisely the gap in his capabilities. He then looked for supporting skills and found Source Power Absorption, absorbs ambient energy and converts it into source power, usable after obtaining the source power system. Exchange price, 1,000. Low-level magic compendium, contains various basic magic spells. Exchange price, 1,500. Lightning chain, accumulates energy and releases it as a single devastating bolt of lightning. Power scales with accumulated energy. Exchange price, 3,000. Ming thought it over. A bunch of low-level spells weren't very practical. He could buy 2 rocket launchers and deal more damage than a basic fireball. Instead, he preferred a charge-up spell that could deliver a decisive strike when it mattered. He skipped the compendium and exchanged for the source power system, source power absorption, and lightning chain. The total cost was 14,000 points. After the purchases, he had 3,806 points left. He suppressed the restlessness in his chest, added the 3 items to his shopping cart, and left the exchange center to head to the enhancement hall. Thanks to Yogu Cheng and reader 11649911458311105 for your generous donations. Thanks to QS Stray KU and IMA for your monthly passes. I don't care if readers are real or fake, I just want continuous reads. Please. Chapter 72. Advancing the Gotham Scepter. Li Ming hadn't rushed to trade for new skills because he'd long ago noticed that equipment descriptions often said things like upgradable or non-upgradable. Even the Gotham Scepter was listed as upgradable. Right now, the scepter was his trump card. Without it in the John Wick world, he wouldn't have been able to so easily trick and kill reincarnators from both major factions. Still, against second-tier reincarnators like Wang Hu and Hu Feiyang, the duration of Wrath of Gotham was noticeably shorter. It had lasted 6 minutes against Wang Hu, but only 3 minutes against Hu Feiyang, who had the highest mental attributes. 3 minutes on the battlefield could accomplish a lot, but Li Ming preferred to prepare for the unexpected. By most accounts, Wang Hu and Hu Feiyang were strong even among second-tier reincarnators. According to Dezuo, a second-tier reincarnator's top attributes generally exceed 50 points. Wang Hu's abnormal physical fitness seemed more than 5 times that of an ordinary person. The enhancement hall, like the exchange center, led into a private personal space when you entered. Li Ming pulled out 5 pieces of equipment: the Gotham Scepter, the Blade of Cunning, the Tear of the Goddess, the Yellowed Necklace, and the Light Feather Staff. All of them were upgradable, and all were useful to him. He tried an advancement first, and 3 options popped up. Quality advancement improves equipment quality. Current item requires 20,000 points. Enhancement advancement enhances equipment effects. Current item requires 10,000 points. Fusion advancement fuses effects or characteristics of other equipment into this item. Each fusion requires 1,000 points. Good news, full range advancement was possible. Bad news, Li Ming didn't have enough points to do it. The Gotham Scepter was a lord's equipment, which meant the prices were steep. When he switched to the Light Feather Staff and checked again, quality advancement only required 3,500 points. After a moment of thought, Li Ming focused on the third option, fusion advancement. Fusion cost fewer points per attempt, but it required sacrificing another piece of equipment as material, so the real cost wasn't negligible. He happened to have a good number of items on hand. Between them, he had just over 17,000 points, enough for 1 enhancement advancement, but he hesitated. The scepter's current effect was a general attribute increase. Upgrading would give him a small permanent boost, but Wrath of Gotham was a uniquely powerful offensive skill. Spending a lot of points to slightly raise attributes would mean he couldn't afford source power exchanges later. It didn't feel cost-effective. Li Ming pictured himself on the battlefield, holding the Gotham Scepter in one hand and the Light Feather Staff in the other. It felt ridiculous. Trying to use multiple weapons at once was usually worse than mastering one. He decided to test fusion, starting with the Blade of Cunning. If it failed, the loss wouldn't be too severe. Fuse and advance the Gotham Scepter. Please select material equipment. Note, for identical attributes, only the highest level will be applied. They cannot stack. Li Ming selected the Blade of Cunning. The scepter and the blade floated up. 2 beats later, the blade collapsed into a streak of light and merged into the scepter. Fusing. Fusion successful. Gotham Scepter current effects. Agility +2. 4-dimensional attributes +1. In Gotham, 4-dimensional attributes +2. Li Ming smiled. He examined the scepter. Its appearance hadn't changed, but agility had increased by 2 points. Then he drew the rapier from the scepter and realized it was sharper. Clearly, the Blade of Cunning's sharpness had been inherited. Encouraged, he pulled out the Light Feather Staff and fused it next. The staff dissolved into light and flowed into the scepter. Effects: Agility +2, Spirit +5, Casting Speed 10%. Four-dimensional attributes +1. In Gotham, four-dimensional attributes +2. The Scepter's bonuses had jumped a tier. After fusing the light feather staff, Li Ming noticed the scepter seemed more refined. The owl relief at its top looked almost alive, each feather lifelike. Most importantly, the Gotham scepter could now be used to cast spells. Li Ming was pleased. He had 15,806 points remaining. The three items he'd been eyeing, source power absorption, and lightning chain, totaled 14,000 points. If he exchanged for them, he would have 1,806 points left, enough for another fusion. He still had two other pieces of equipment, the Tear of the Goddess and the Yellowed Necklace. The Yellowed Necklace only gave Constitution +1 and Agility +1, overlapping with the Blade of Cunning. Fusing it would replace an existing agility bonus and cost a point he didn't want to lose. The necklace could simply be worn. He tried to fuse the Tear of the Goddess. Fuse and advance the Gotham Scepter using the Tear of the Goddess as material. The Tear of the Goddess is a gem and cannot be used as material for fusion. Only then did Li Ming realize the Tear wasn't equipment. How can gems be used? He asked. Gems can be inlaid into equipment. Equipment must have gem slots. Inlaying costs 100 points per attempt. Does the Gotham Scepter have gem slots? Gotham Scepter gem slot count 2. Only 2. No wonder Hu Feiyang hadn't inlaid the Tear into the light feather staff. The staff probably had no slots. Li Ming decided to inlay it. After a burst of light, the Tear of the Goddess was set perfectly into the owl relief, instantly making the scepter look several ranks more noble. I'm going to push this as far as I can, Li Ming thought. He reached into his personal space and pulled out another heavy item, Wang Hu's alloy greatsword. Fuse and advance the Gotham Scepter using the alloy greatsword as material. The massive greatsword dissolved into light and merged into the scepter. The scepter's appearance stayed the same, but its overall hardness increased noticeably. The greatsword's original characteristic had taken effect. Since Li Ming planned to make the Gotham Scepter his main weapon, he wanted it strengthened as much as possible. The added sturdy trait would also keep it from being easily damaged. After several fusions, the Gotham Scepter was now very different. Gotham Scepter quality, excellent. Type Lord's Equipment Holder, Li Ming effects. Agility +2, Spirit 5, Casting Speed 10%, Four-dimensional attributes +1. In Gotham, four-dimensional attributes +2. Gem, Tear of the Goddess, can store 360 units of energy. Characteristic: sturdy, greatly increases durability. Skill, Wrath of Gotham, active skill. Centered on the Scepter, enemies within a 20-meter radius are driven into an indiscriminate attack state for 10 minutes. Specific effects depend on the target. Cooldown, 48 hours. Upgradable. A newcomer like Li Ming, with experience in only 2 mission worlds, now possessed such luxurious equipment. If word got out, countless reincarnators would be green with envy. But considering faction politics and the Scepter's destructive potential, it also meant many reincarnators might end up dead because of it. Not out of envy, but because the Gotham Scepter was that dangerous. Chapter 73, Third World Mission. After finishing the upgrades, Li Ming redeemed source power absorption, and lightning chain, which left him with only 706 points. He didn't regret it. Those points bought the most important things, an answer for his mother's illness and a way to extend his parents' lives, and pushed his own power to a new level. He gripped the Gotham Scepter. A flash of electricity leapt more than 10 meters and shattered a large rock across the training ground. He was still in the Reincarnation Space's practice arena, testing how lightning chain behaved when fueled by source power. The effect was even stronger than the skill description had suggested. Source power seemed to be a higher tier of energy than ordinary magic. He hadn't charged it fully yet. When the source power reservoir filled, the lightning chain's strength would scale dramatically. With the medicine for his mother found, Li Ming's focus narrowed to one goal: complete the next main mission and then go home. He wanted stability, so he spent another 100 points on a common medical kit and 50 points on a survival kit from the trade interface to guard against harsh environments in the mission world. That left him with 556 points for emergencies, he'd learned from experience in the John Wick world. Over the next day, he explored most of the reincarnation space. There were many tempting things, but he couldn't afford them. Besides, he found the space a little dull compared to the mission worlds. Part of that was his background. He'd been a movie fan in his previous life, and getting to step into favorite films and shows made the mission worlds far more enticing. So he spent most of his time in the training ground and his personal space, practicing staff sword techniques and getting used to source power. With a day left on the mission countdown, he upgraded staff sword mastery to level 5, lightning chain to level 3, and even improved the John Wick combat template. Skills redeemed from the space start at level 1. Further ranks require personal practice. His status panel now read: Name, Li Ming, Strength 20, Constitution 21, 20 plus 1, Agility 24, 3 plus 1, Spirit 18. Skills: Melee Combat level 8, Marksmanship level 7, Firearms Master 6, John Wick Combat Template level 6, Staff Sword Mastery level 5, Lightning Chain level 3, Source Power Absorption Items, Gotham Scepter, Yellowed Necklace, points 556. Source Power Absorption had no level. Its absorption speed and storage capacity depended on spirit. Redeeming Source Power had also boosted his spirit by 2 points. The necklace gave +1 to Constitution and +1 to Agility. When he wielded the Gotham Scepter, his strength ticked up another point. Taking all bonuses into account, his real attributes became Strength 21, 20 plus 1, Constitution 22, 20 plus 2, Agility 27, 23 plus 4, Spirit 24, 18 plus 6. Compared to an ordinary person, his baseline physical fitness was now about twice as good. With the scepter, it was nearly 2.5 times normal, and his agility was approaching 3 times an average person's. At the very least, Li Ming could easily outmatch his past self from the John Wick world. Everything ready, he tuned himself to peak condition and waited for the third mission world. Searching for mission world, world ID 1T9992 linked, portal activated. Countdown to entry, 1 minute. Advice from the abyss, survive. That world ID is unusual, Li Ming muttered. He stepped through the portal. When he opened his eyes, he stood in a wide open field. Farmland stretched around him, and a small town sat in the distance, suburban, quiet. The Abyss faction effect activated. Identity implanted. The snap, the Avengers, a Marvel world. The implanted identity was a Chinese immigrant working in Tlaxcala, Mexico, with no special background, just an ordinary small-time member of a local gang. Li Ming searched his mental memory library for related plots and found a match. Spider-Man, Far From Home. In this timeline, Avengers 4 had already ended, and the older generation of heroes had mostly retired. He hesitated. Could he refuse the implanted identity? If he didn't take it, he wouldn't get the 3 free attribute points the identity might give. But the film's plot was peculiar. Having that identity might be more trouble than help. Ding. Please confirm whether to abandon the faction effect. Yes. Li Ming selected yes. The doppelganger identity in this world vanished as if it had never existed. He realized then that the doppelganger wasn't a version of him in every parallel universe, only an identity generated for that particular world. If he accepted it, a local counterpart existed. If not, it didn't. There was, in essence, only one unique Li Ming. World list retrieving. Retrieval successful. Current world unexplored. Can be converted into an exclusive world after completing the main mission. Good, this world had no other space links, so he didn't have to worry about other reincarnators showing up like last time. Main Mission 1, prevent the world from forgetting Peter Parker. Mission duration, 30 days. Main Mission 2, prevent Peter Parker's identity from being exposed. Mission duration, 30 days. Prevent May Parker's death. Mission duration, 30 days. Note, mission evaluation will be based on the overall completion status upon return. Achieving a C rank is considered mission completion. Abandoning the identity cost him those initial attribute points, which he briefly regretted. But there were 3 main missions now, and he studied them carefully. Essentially, the job was to be Spider-Man's babysitter. Li Ming thought through the plot. If he exposed the true face of the villain, Mysterio, many subsequent problems would never happen. That would be a simple way to clear the mission, remove the threat at its root, and prevent Peter from suffering. but that would remove all the dramatic events he could exploit for his own gain. He made his decision. He would complete the mission, but on his own terms, maximize his own benefits while ensuring the objectives were met. Chapter 74, Spider-Man only wants to date now. Whenever Li Ming entered a mission world, he immediately listed the most valuable things he could obtain there. What mattered most in Spider-Man Far From Home? With analysis running, his first thought was the Spider-Man bloodline. Next came the glasses. Edith. Tony Stark left for Peter Parker. Edith was Tony's global defense system. It could access worldwide intelligence and control a fleet of drones. But to Li Ming, the single most valuable thing wasn't the glasses at all. It was the authority Tony had left Peter. With access to Tony's protocols, Peter could pull any data from Stark Industries, including Iron Man armor schematics. Better yet, this version of Spider-Man was unbelievably gullible. By sheer coincidence, fooling people was Li Ming's specialty. He'd long complained about the little spider's strange decisions while watching the movie, but now that he'd stepped into that world, he wanted the protagonist even more naive. If things went well, Li Ming had a premonition he'd walk away with a major enhancement. The plots of Spider-Man Far From Home and Spider-Man No Way Home connect directly. After Endgame, the world returned to a fragile peace. Peter went back to school and threw himself into the most important thing of his teenage life, chasing girls. 16 or 17, about to graduate high school, that was normal. For a superhero, it was reckless. Tony had left Edith as Peter's assistant on his heroic journey, but Peter wasn't ready to be a full-time hero. When his responsibilities clashed with his personal life, his instinct was to run. He just wanted to pursue MJ. Quentin Beck exploited that. Quentin posed as Mysterio, a multiverse hero who claimed he would sacrifice himself to save the world, and he won Peter's trust. Quentin had assembled a team of disgruntled former Stark employees, experts in different fields bitter about Tony. Using AR projection tech and drones, they manufactured the image of a new superhero the public would accept. Even Nick Fury, at that time impersonated by a Skrull, was fooled. Peter handed Edith to Quentin, thinking he was entrusting it to a mature hero, then went off on his own romantic detour. When Peter accidentally discovered Quentin's true identity, and after a fierce showdown, he defeated him. But Quentin struck back before he died. He fabricated a video showing Spider-Man murdering Mysterio in an act of jealousy, and then exposed Spider-Man's secret identity as Peter Parker to the world. Peter's life collapsed. He was attacked and vilified, and those around him suffered. In desperation, he saw a Doctor Strange action figure on the street, and, in a burst of desperation, went to Strange asking to use magic to make everyone forget that Peter was Spider-Man. It was a brilliant half-step. He didn't try to erase Mysterio from people's memories, only his own identity, and it was headed by another unreliable adult. Doctor Strange, without full consideration, cast an extremely dangerous forgetting spell. The result was worse than either of them expected. The spell tore holes in the multiverse and summoned not only villains, but other versions of Spider-Man, the Tobey Maguire movie Spider-Man and the Andrew Garfield Amazing Spider-Man as well. When Strange realized the consequences, he tried to stop the spell, but Peter had learned the villains would die if sent back to their universes, and his savior complex, fired by his concern for Aunt May, made him want to cure rather than return them. He set no limits. Predictably, the villains rebelled, and thanks to Stark tech, each gained dangerous upgrades. Aunt May died. With the help of the two other Spider-Men, Peter eventually stopped them, but the damage was irreversible. The multiverse was converging on his Earth. To save everyone, Peter reluctantly chose to have the world forget Peter Parker, cutting himself out of his own life. The Holland Peter grew up at an extraordinarily heavy cost. Li Ming didn't care about Peter's growth. He cared about what he could take. Quentin's impersonation of Mysterio had obvious flaws. The biggest was that Quentin showed his own face. As a former Stark employee, his actions and records were traceable. It wasn't that he couldn't mask his face. It was that Quentin and his team wanted attention and public praise. They'd been living in Tony Stark's shadow, and with Tony gone, they wanted to claim the prestige they thought was rightfully theirs. Quentin was an actor at heart. He wanted glory, not anonymity, so he wouldn't hide his real face. Concerning the risk of exposure, they could always spin excuses. Over time, some people might grow suspicious, but in the short term, it was perfectly plausible to trick Peter into handing over Edith. Li Ming had dealt with men like that before. He knew exactly how to handle them. Penguin. He'd handled showmen and glory seekers before and didn't need to be told twice. Boom. Boom. At that moment, the town Li Ming had been observing was suddenly swept by a savage wind. Near the Gulf of Mexico, hurricanes were common, but this one was different. The storm itself seemed to have a human face. The hurricane monster hit with tremendous force, and the town was quickly reduced to rubble. Li Ming watched from a short distance away, unafraid, striding toward the devastation. He didn't think this was some supernatural attack. It was a staged action scene by Quentin and his crew. The hurricane and the human face were AR projections. The destruction came from hidden drones. High-tech drones could demolish a backward town with terrifying ease. Quentin had staged the spectacle in Mexico to win Fury's approval, even faking electromagnetic signatures so S.H.I.E.L.'s satellites would register an anomalous event. Their strategy was circular. Trick S.H.I.E.L.D., then use S.H.I.E.L.D. to trick the naive Spider-Man. Peter fell for it easily, especially with Fury on Earth being an impersonating Skrull who wasn't as sharp as the original. Quentin watched his handiwork with satisfaction. All that remained was to wait for Fury to arrive. Then a voice behind him made him jump. "This world actually has projections that realistic," the voice said. "Are you guys staging a terrorist attack? Thanks to Big Cat in the Rain for the monthly pass support. Continue to beg for collections," and continued reading. Chapter 75. Hurry up and find an excuse to fool me. Li Ming walked, tapping his staff against the ground. It looked like he was using it for balance, but he was actually exploiting Gotham's madness, the staff's ability to mark any life form within 20 meters as an enemy. He'd discovered the trick back in the reincarnation space. It made the staff act like a detector, perfect for seeing through illusions. Quentin spun around, startled to find the man in the tailored black suit holding an exquisite cane. It wasn't the man's looks that surprised him, but the fact that this stranger had pinpointed his exact location. Quentin was completely surrounded by projected illusions. To anyone else, the spot where he stood appeared empty. Realizing the newcomer was no ordinary threat, Quentin stayed hidden. He first tapped his earpiece and quietly ordered his team to check the stranger's identity, then prepared to slip away. Before Quentin could move, Li Ming's voice cut across the square. "Where are you going?" His tone had hardened. "It looks like you really are terrorists." Then Li Ming raised his staff and lightning crackled along it. To Quentin, he looked like a righteous avenger ready to punish wrongdoers. "No!" Quentin materialized and called out. "We're not terrorists." "Then what are you doing?" Li Ming didn't seem convinced. "You just attacked a settlement." "Quentin, there's no facial recognition match for this person in our database. It's like he appeared out of thin air," came a reply in Quentin's ear. "He's unfamiliar with this place, and he's using sorcery." "Did you hear what he said?" "This world, human settlement," someone muttered. "Janice, what are you trying to say?" Quentin asked into his mic, forcing a calming smile and doing his best to soothe Li Ming. "He might not be from this world." "Impossible," Quentin replied at once, instinctively rejecting the notion. Their whole script was built around him being a visitor from another world. Now someone was claiming that such a being actually stood before them. How could that be a coincidence? "Quentin, it's very possible," Gutman, the team's script editor, chimed in. "I wrote the script because strange people show up on Earth all the time. Think Thor, Loki, the Chitauri." The comment planted a seed of doubt in Quentin. "Forget whether he's from another world," Janice said urgently. "He's clearly a sorcerer, and you're in danger. Deploying the drones won't be faster than his spellcasting." William, who handled drones, warned. "Assume he is a threat and say something to stabilize him." They were right. The electric light on Li Ming's staff blinked dangerously close, and none of them were combatants. Any real attack would cause panic. Li Ming had already found Quentin. If he unleashed Lightning Chain, Quentin would be dead in an instant. Gutman reacted fast with a solution. "Say you're punishing criminals." "I'm punishing evil," Quentin announced loudly. Li Ming looked skeptical, but the lightning in his hand dimmed enough that he lowered his staff. Quentin and his team seized the moment and improvised. "This town looks ordinary," Quentin said, sounding indignant, "but it's controlled by drug traffickers who've ruined thousands of lives. Have you seen the people wrecked by drugs? They go to pieces, skin and bones, families torn apart, homes destroyed. They're left to die on the roadside." Quentin, who wasn't a natural scientist, turned out to be a better actor. The more he spoke, the more convincing he became. "But," he raised his voice for effect, "in this country, Mexico." Quentin stabbed a finger at the ground, his tone sharpening. "The government turns a blind eye and even colludes with the dealers. That's why we have to take the law into our own hands." "Quentin, play the footage," Gutman ordered. Quentin immediately projected a video for Ming, staged clips of drug transactions and devastated neighborhoods, all fabricated by the team to back up their story. "Mexico?" Ming repeated. "My world has a Mexico too, and it's not exactly reliable," Quentin said. The electricity around Ming's staff faded. He lowered it, but only as a show. If Quentin made any suspicious move, Ming could still cast lightning chain and kill him. Ming nodded as if in sympathy. "Being forced to act as a vigilante can be a way to stop even worse evil," he murmured. "Quentin, did you hear me? He's definitely from another world, and he might be a vigilante too." Gutman whispered excitedly over the comms. "Our main worry is the authenticity of Mysterio's identity. If we have a real visitor from another world, it makes everything more believable." Quentin had to stay silent. Ming was watching him. They couldn't kill him now, and they couldn't let him leave after seeing so much. Deception was their only option. After a quick huddle with the senior writers, Gutman fed Quentin a new line. "Who are you, and what do you mean by your world?" "My name is Ming. You can call me Lee." Ming frowned. "One moment I was in Gotham, and the next I fell through a spatial rift and wound up here." "Something must have affected the multiverse," someone on Quentin's team blurted out, and the name that flashed through their minds was unanimous: the Blip. The memory of half the world turning to dust and then returning 5 years later was still raw. Many on Quentin's team had vanished and come back themselves. After such events, a visitor from another universe didn't sound impossible at all. "Do you know who the most famous scientist in this world is? I want to find him and see if he can help me get back," Ming asked. A crossover wanting to return home made perfect sense to the team, and whose name topped the list as the world's greatest scientist? For Quentin and his crew, the answer was obvious: Tony Stark. They were all failures who'd obsessed over Stark, blaming him for their misfortunes. The group's dynamic skewed toward worshipping their rival. Elevating Stark meant elevating their own narrative. "Unfortunately, the greatest scientist is dead," Quentin said, following Gutman's improvised script. "But I know where his work is stored. There's bound to be something there that can help you." "Oh, where?" Ming's interest was piqued, exactly as they'd hoped. Quentin allowed himself a faint smile. Script synchronization successful. Script synchronization successful. Thanks to reader 220316274430 and to Lin Jiasen for the large monthly support. Please keep reading. I'm begging you. Chapter 76. A Match Made in Heaven. The greatest scientist in this world was Tony Stark, and he was also one of the best superheroes. But he died a few months ago in a major battle. Quentin's voice trembled. He looked down, and a couple of tears escaped. We're all very grief-stricken over his passing. Quentin and Ming had arrived at the team's rendezvous point early. Nick Fury was still on his way, so they had some time. "All of us here once worked for Stark," Quentin continued. "We worked behind the scenes, helping him deal with countless problems." He spread his arms. The other team members around them tilted their heads down, each recalling the saddest memories they could. Behind Quentin, a screenwriter, invisible to most, fed him his lines, and Quentin paused dramatically between sentences to let the moments land. "Originally, we helped Tony become Iron Man and saved many lives," he said, choking up between phrases. "But everything changed after Tony was gone. The technological breakthroughs Tony left behind were all sealed by the authorities," he went on. "They claimed it was for regulation, but we all know the truth. Some people are trying to steal Tony's research." His tone grew urgent. "Thankfully, they don't have the clearance. They can't access or use his tech, not yet. But without Iron Man, evil is running wild again. Quentin fixed his gaze on Li Ming, watching his expression shift with every word. He knew he had his attention. Even without Tony, we're still defenders of justice. Quentin raised his fist and delivered the line with theatrical conviction. That's why we've come together, to fight evil in our own way. Why the disguises, then? Li Ming asked at the perfect moment, honestly puzzled. Quentin answered with a rueful smile. Being a hero has a price. We protect people, and many of us have families and loved ones who could be targeted. Disguises are necessary. You really are heroes, Li Ming said softly, then addressed the group. All of you are heroes. Seeing Li Ming believe them so completely, Quentin relaxed for the first time. At that cue, the screenwriter Gutman fed him the next line, and he turned to Li Ming with a suddenly solemn face. Enough about us. You want to go home, don't you, Li? Of course. Li Ming nodded eagerly. I heard Tony once developed a space-time displacement restorer. Quentin put on an authoritative expression. Do you know about the blip? About 5 years ago, half the people on our Earth suddenly vanished, sent into other timelines. Half the people? Li Ming's eyes widened. He'd never heard anything so extreme. Yes, Quentin nodded gravely. Tony worked on many solutions. The space-time displacement restorer was one of them. It can return people who were displaced back to their original timeline. Where is it? Li Ming's excitement was immediate. A way home could be real. That's the problem. Quentin spread his hands helplessly. All of Tony's research has been seized by the authorities. How can I get access to the restorer? Li Ming asked, eager to cooperate. Quentin looked embarrassed. Even if you formally petition the officials and state your case, they probably won't lend it out. Unless, he trailed off. Unless what? Janice prompted, playing her part. With a team this large, Quentin couldn't be the only one speaking. Quentin hesitated, as if weighing the risk. Janice waited expectantly, and Quentin finally explained. We once drafted a contingency plan, an identity cover. We'd create a superhero from another world through staged illusions to deflect attention away from ourselves. There's a risk of being exposed, Janice added. Li Ming's face lit up. If I genuinely am from another world, that would make the story much more convincing. Right, Quentin nodded, visibly browbeating himself into confidence. If we create a superhero and you endorse him as an otherworldly arrival, the officials will be much more inclined to lend out the restorer. What do you all think? Quentin asked the group. No problem. It's what we should do. We'll help. The rest of the team agreed readily. Quentin felt reassured. All right, we'll go ahead with the plan. We'll create a hero to help Li get home. Li Ming was genuinely moved. Thank you all so much. Quentin clapped him on the shoulder. Help others, and you help yourself. But we'll need you to do more than just endorse him, Quentin warned. We'll need you to draw the officials' attention, to buy us time. The person in charge will be here soon. Li Ming understood the plan. His true status as an otherworldly visitor would be used to endorse Mysterio. Quentin planned to avoid dragging Peter Parker into the deception. Instead, he intended to hand Li Ming over to Fury, using him as a distraction. Quentin and his team were wary of Nick Fury, the head of S.H.I.E.L.D., but the situation had changed since the old days. Iron Man, Captain America, and Natasha were gone. Hawkeye, Hulk, and Thor had retired or left Earth. Fury no longer had the same resources or reach he once did. What Quentin and his team didn't know was that they worried for nothing. The Fury and Agent Hill on Earth were actually Skrulls in disguise. The Skrulls, an alien race capable of shape-shifting, had come to Earth as interstellar refugees in the past. Fury had used the excuse of helping them resettle to put them on his payroll. Meanwhile, Fury himself had been out of the loop for 5 years and had been operating from S-Forward in space. The few S.H.I.E.L.D. agents left on Earth were handled by the Skrull Talos impersonating Fury. The fake Fury wasn't as cunning as the original. Following the plan, Quentin prepared a holographic reel in front of the Skrulls impersonating Fury and Hill, showing convincingly realistic scenes of Mysterio's powers and destructive potential. Then Li Ming came out and explained his sudden arrival as a result of the blip and occasional multiversal fluctuations, an explanation that fit perfectly with the staged effects and the energy signatures Quentin had manufactured. Talus, already predisposed to believe the show, accepted the story readily. In fact, even the real Fury might have been convinced. The Fury who'd returned after Avengers 4 was not the same master spy he had once been. But Quentin liked to think it was Li Ming's presence that made the deception so believable. Li Ming, for his part, knew he wasn't endorsing Mysterio out of conviction. He didn't understand multiverse theory, only that he needed the officials to trust him, and if endorsing Mysterio got him access to the Restorer, he'd take it. It was, in the simplest terms, a chain of mutual usefulness. He'd use them, they'd use him, and together they'd use the system to get what they wanted. Thanks to Ye Xuanlov, Senja Kao, Instructor Fei, and Xie Huanghun for their monthly support. Who understands the feeling of writing only 4,000 words after sitting all day? Please leave some likes and comments to comfort me. Chapter 77. Peter's Plan. Peter Parker had been feeling more restless than usual. After a long period of second-guessing, he finally decided he couldn't wait any longer. He was going to confess his feelings to his classmate, Michelle Jones, MJ. People might not always know her full name, but they all knew MJ. Ever since the snap, most of Peter's high school classmates had been dust for 5 years, only returned a few months ago when Banner used the Infinity Gauntlet. Banner had been careful. He'd wished everyone back in a safe way, so there were no terrifying mid-air reappearances. But after returning to school, Peter couldn't bottle up his feelings anymore. MJ's intelligence, her free spirit, and her dark, dry sense of humor pulled at him in a way nothing else did. A perfect chance had appeared. A school-organized trip to Europe. Teen trips, close quarters on planes and trains, new cities. What better time to make a move? Peter laid out his plan in obsessive detail to his chubby best friend. "Ned, I've got a plan," he said. "Step 1, after we get on the plane, I'll sit next to MJ. Step 2, I'll buy a two-way headphone splitter so we can watch movies together the whole flight." "No problem," Ned agreed. "Step 3, when we get to Venice, Mrs. Famous for glass, right?" "Aha. I'll buy her a Black Dahlia necklace," Peter said seriously. "Because she's obsessed with that. Murder case," Ned supplied. "Right, she loves the Black Dahlia murder case." "This generation's MJ is so into mysteries," Peter said, smiling. "Smartest MJ of the three of us, I swear." Step 4, when we get to Paris, I'll give her the necklace at the top of the Eiffel Tower. Then step 5, I'll tell her how I feel. Step 6, Peter went on, letting his imagination take over, I hope she says she feels the same way. Don't forget step 7, Ned warned, straight-faced. Peter grabbed a pen and write it down. Don't do the first 6 steps. What? Peter blinked. Europe is a paradise for bachelors, Pete, Ned said seriously. I mean, no offense, but Europeans love Americans. And he waggled his eyebrows. Over half of them are girls. Peter rolled his eyes. Suit yourself. I really like MJ. Sometimes when she looks at me, my whole world spins. Hey, she's walking over, Ned whispered. Peter's brain scrambled. MJ leaned in, smiling. Hey, dorks, excited for the science trip? Yes, we were just talking about the trip and Peter's travel plans, Ned replied. No, I wasn't, Peter blurted, afraid Ned would spill everything. He plans to collect little souvenir spoons from every country. Ned winked at Peter, pure teasing. I'm not collecting spoons. Ned is collecting spoons, Peter corrected quickly. Talking to you two is exhausting, MJ said with a smile. Oh, and do yourselves a favor. Download a VPN before you go. You don't want anyone tracking you abroad. Peter and Ned nodded dutifully and then promptly forgot to do it. People who liked mysteries tended to be a little paranoid. Why would anyone track a bunch of high schoolers? Between school and Aunt May's work, Peter's life was full enough. After class, he helped May at the Homeless Aid Society to raise donations and awareness. The work was for people displaced by the blip. 5 years without a home had left a lot of people without belongings and support. Because Spider-Man was now a household name and Peter was publicly close to Tony Stark, a lot of people called him the next Iron Man. Peter always rejected the label. He felt too far behind Tony. He'd met Tony at his peak, and that made Peter feel small, like he could never be as good a hero. Still, things were changing. He even felt like he was getting a new uncle. Backstage at the charity gala, Aunt May and Tony's former bodyguard, Happy Hogan, were acting unusually close, like family. Peter was about to pry when Happy interrupted. Listen, Nick Fury wants to see you. Nick Fury wants to see me? Peter said, stunned. Why? He'd rather not have to deal with the stern, uncompromising director. I think he wants you for some hero work. You're a superhero, Happy said. He still had a reverence for Fury. He manages superheroes. Then he can find someone else, Peter mumbled. He was a high school kid. He wasn't ready for world-saving summons. Apparently he doesn't think so, Happy said with a shrug. At that moment, Peter's phone buzzed. Happy leaned in. Unknown number. It's him. I don't want to talk to Nick Fury, Peter said, shaking his head. Answer it, Happy ordered. Why? Because if you don't answer, I have to. I'm scared of him. Peter was equally scared. In front of Happy, he did the most childish thing. He hung up. You hung up on Nick Fury? Happy demanded. I didn't block him, Peter said, trying to play it cool. Tell him I'll call back after my trip. Peter felt immediate relief and hurried off toward the banquet. No one was going to derail his plan to confess to MJ on the trip. There were no superheroes in his plan. Happy stood rooted for a beat, hands on the phone, one eye wet. He picked it back up and began to speak into it, half apologetic, half pleading. No, he really didn't block you. He said he'll call back after the trip. Nearby, Talos, who'd once impersonated Fury and now had access to nearly all of Fury's Earth-based resources, stood beside the real Fury and watched the whole exchange with amusement. Even the man who'd been the world's most connected agent found it unexpectedly difficult to get through to a high school kid. But for Peter, that was perfect. He had a plane to catch, a seat to claim next to MJ, a headphone splitter to buy, a necklace to track down in Venice, and an Eiffel Tower to climb. None of Nick Fury's calls could interrupt what he had planned. Chapter 78. It's perfectly reasonable for the water city of Venice to have a water monster, right? It seems this Spider-Man you're talking about still doesn't have the confidence to be a hero, Ming mused as he rode with Quentin, their cooperation having earned Talos's trust. Talos nodded. Aside from the young Spider-Man, he didn't currently have any other available superheroes. Hearing Ming say Peter lacked confidence, Talos thought of the things Tony Stark had left for him. No confidence? Then he'd give Peter some. But first, he had to reach him. There isn't enough time, Talos said. We just dealt with the Earth Elemental in Morocco yesterday. Beck says the next elementals will appear in Venice in 2 days. There's no time to go to New York to find Peter. From that remark, Ming deduced what he'd suspected. Fury's intelligence network on Earth had been badly damaged, so badly that they hadn't even known Peter was heading to Europe for vacation. No wonder Talos said they were blind and deaf. Ming didn't think Talos and Fury were deliberately pretending not to know. They wouldn't risk all of Europe's safety just to mess with Peter. Besides, in their world, it seemed the villains always followed Peter wherever he went. It's a shame I can't do much in a fight that big, Ming said. Everyone has strengths and weaknesses, Talos told him. When it comes to magical creatures, Beck's the expert. Ming didn't have flashy supernatural powers like Quentin Beck, but Talos had seen him fight. None of Talos's agents could beat him. If Talos had to choose, he preferred someone like Ming, strong, competent, and easy to use when needed. While Ming and Talos moved toward Venice, Peter finally got on the plane he'd been looking forward to. From the start, though, nothing went as planned. He couldn't sit next to MJ. Too shy to ask, he begged Ned to swap seats. Ned, who'd wanted to play games with him, couldn't refuse and went to Betty, who was sitting beside MJ, inventing a story about Peter having an allergic reaction to the perfume of the woman in front. But a nearby teacher overheard and, being responsible, moved Peter to sit next to him instead. After a series of seat changes, Ned and Betty wound up sitting together, and Peter's old classmate Brad, who hadn't been snapped 5 years ago and had grown into a handsome young man, ended up beside MJ. Peter could tell Brad was interested in MJ. It was like handing the assist to an opponent because he hadn't had the nerve to act. Watching MJ and Brad laugh over a movie, Peter felt like he might break. I thought of her first, he wanted to cry. Things got worse after the plane landed. Peter saw Ned walking hand in hand with Betty. When Betty went to handle some paperwork, she kissed Ned goodbye. What's going on? Peter asked. We talked on the plane and realized we have a lot in common, Ned said, beaming. We're boyfriend and girlfriend now. What happened to the American bachelor hunting in Europe plan? Peter asked, stunned. I was an ignorant youth back then, Ned replied with mock solemnity. Now I've grown up. Come here, baby. Betty called to him. Ned rushed off, leaving a very confused Peter standing alone. His rival had stolen his chance, and his best friend had actually gotten the outcome Peter had hoped for himself. In his fluster, he didn't notice how many times MJ secretly glanced his way. They arrived in Venice, and, despite the rocky start, the plan had to continue. Peter searched through a dozen shops before he found and bought the Black Dahlia necklace he'd wanted. As he walked out of the store, someone suddenly jumped out and shouted, "Boo!" It was MJ. Peter quickly hid the gift bag behind his back. They wandered Venice together, and Peter never found the right moment to give her the necklace. He worried she might refuse, and he'd planned to give it to her in Paris anyway. He didn't realize his plan had already gone off the rails. After walking for a while, Peter noticed something strange. The water in the canals was flowing oddly, as if something below the surface was disturbing it. Then, with a tremendous crash, an explosion erupted beneath the water. A giant made entirely of water rose up and immediately started causing destruction. It smashed a building with a single fist. People screamed and scattered. Peter dragged Ned out of the flooded street and told him to take MJ and Betty and get to safety while he stayed. But confronting a massive, intangible water being was nearly impossible. His webbing wouldn't stick to it at all. He focused on pulling anyone in immediate danger out of the water, but a huge wave from the creature drenched him and knocked him backward. Just when he felt completely overwhelmed, a figure in a round helmet and a flamboyant combat suit flew in from the sky like a more theatrical version of a sorcerer. Peter didn't know who it was, but he recognized a superhero when he saw one. The newcomer launched green, energy-like attacks at the water giant, trading blows with it and seeming to hold his own. Peter scrambled up onto a rooftop and shouted, "Sir, excuse me, I can help. Let me help. I'm super strong, super sticky." The hero glanced at him and said curtly, "I need to lure it away from the canal." With that, the masked hero drew the water giant away, and Peter followed. He used his webs to shore up damaged facades and hold up crumbling parts of buildings so they wouldn't collapse on bystanders. As the hero engaged the creature, Peter worked behind him, repairing and supporting ruined structures. They led the water giant toward the city's central square, far enough from the canals that the creature would struggle to replenish itself, but the area was full of tourists. During the battle, the square's clock tower was damaged. Peter, seeing the tower teeter, raced up and used his webbing to brace the broken sections, then shot webs to the neighboring buildings to stabilize it. Don't let his age fool you. Peter's strength was enormous. He could handle weights of 20 tons without breaking a sweat. The fight between the masked hero and the poured water behemoth was thunderous. Peter did his best to control the clock tower's fall, guiding it into an unoccupied area so it wouldn't crush anyone. By the time he climbed down, the hero had finished the job and the water giant was no more. "Wow, that's what a superhero should be like," Peter breathed, exhausted and exhilarated. Nearby, Ming watched, eyes bright. He had seen Spider-Man pull the entire clock tower by himself. He licked his lips. "This bloodline," he murmured with a possessive grin. "I'm claiming it." Chapter 79, First Meeting with Spider-Man. On the analysis interface, the weakened T-103 Tyrant blood evolution fluid had already reached 72% progress, but Ming felt Spider-Man's bloodline was a much better fit for his needs. Looking at the 4 primary attributes on his personal panel made it clear. Strength. The Tobey Maguire Spider-Man could stop a speeding train. The Tom Holland version wasn't quite as exaggerated, but he once pulled a cruise ship. Marvel's official data put Spider-Man's strength limit at 25 tons. Tom Holland's Spider-Man was young, but his strength was still likely over 10 tons, second only to the Hulk among Earth's heroes. Converted into the space system's scale, that would be at least 2,500 strength points. Physique. Spider-Man had excellent endurance and a minor regenerative ability when injured. Not on Wolverine's level, but stronger than most heroes. Agility. Extraordinary, at least 30 to 40 times that of a normal person. Mental attributes. Perhaps the Spider bloodline lagged a bit here, but that was a small flaw. After all, even Superman lacked magic resistance. Bloodlines traded for high prices in the space system. An unweakened tyrant bloodline required over 80,000 points. Li Ming estimated Spider-Man's bloodline wasn't below 200,000. The tyrant might have a slight edge in raw physique, but in combat Spider-Man could easily outmatch a tyrant variant. Besides, the tyrant bloodline warped the user's appearance in battle, extra eyes, fleshy growths, which Li Ming found unacceptable. I need some of Peter's blood, he decided. The analysis required items containing the bloodline, and blood was ideal. Back at the fake Fury's lair, Li Ming quietly organized his plan. Fury, who was actually Talus, went out for a while. When he returned much later, he was with Spider-Man in a red and blue suit. Fury's face was even darker than before. The expression wasn't from being blocked by Peter. Li Ming stifled a chuckle. Quentin, who was also in the lair, lit up at the sight. Li Ming remained calm. They all knew Fury had already handed Edith to Peter. Quentin hadn't told Li Ming anything about it, but the plan was easy to infer. First, use the superhero identities to win Peter's favor. Then, during the Elemental's attack, stage a sacrificial heroic act to appear reliable. While Talus's Fury subtly suggested Peter wasn't ready to be a full-time hero, Quentin would encourage him, gaining his trust. Peter, young, eager to fall in love, and tired of the burden of being Spider-Man, would naturally hand Edith over to the mature, dependable hero Mysterio. Good plan, Li Ming thought. Now it's mine. Edith was the first step. The permissions it controlled were what Li Ming really wanted. For now, he needed to get close to Peter and collect some of his blood. Maria Hill, Fury introduced the main people in the lair, starting with his deputy, a veteran S.H.I.E.L.D. agent, still spirited, though showing a few signs of age. This is Dimitri, he added, pointing to a burly man with a beard. And this is Mr. Beck. You met him today. Peter blinked. Mysterio? What? Quentin asked. Nothing. A nickname a friend gave you, Peter said. All right, you can call me Quentin, Quentin said, stepping forward to shake Peter's hand. You did incredible today. I saw you holding up that clock tower. I wish my world had someone like you. My world? Peter was surprised. Fury explained briefly that Mr. Beck was from a different Earth. Multiverse? Peter's eyes lit up. He loved this stuff. He'd done a lot of science reading. This changes everything about singularity theories, an eternally expanding system, quantum fluctuations. He stopped as he saw Fury, Hill, and the others staring blankly. Sorry, he said sheepishly. You don't have to apologize for being smarter than us, a cheerful voice cut in. Peter looked over and saw a young man in a tailored suit smile at him. This is Mr. Li Ming, Fury said. Like Quentin, he's from a different universe. Mr. Li Ming is also a superhero. Honestly, I'm not that super, Li Ming laughed. No flashy magic, just a street hero. Peter liked that immediately. He'd always thought of himself as a neighborhood hero. The remark raised Li Ming's standing in his eyes. Fury and Quentin then explained the situation. 4 elementals had followed them to this Earth. Quentin, with a touch of theatrical sorrow, said the elementals had killed his family, rubbing his wedding ring for effect to draw Peter closer. Mr. Beck has already handled 3 of them, Fury said. Only the fire elemental remains. It'll appear in Prague in about 48 hours. One mission, kill it. You're coming with us, Fury ordered. Peter resisted. Sir, this is top-tier superhero work. I'm just your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. Oh, come on, you've been to space, Fury shot back, reminding him of prior events. That was an accident, Peter protested. Couldn't you get Thor? Peter suggested. Not on Earth, Fury said. Doctor Strange? Busy. Captain Marvel? Peter asked, remembering the powerful woman who'd made a deep impression during the fight against Thanos. Don't say that name around me, Fury snapped, reacting far stronger than expected. Li Ming remained silent. He knew why. Fury wasn't Fury. He was Talus the Skrull. Before the Skrulls sided with Fury, they'd been routed by Captain Marvel, and the name still set them on edge. I can't. If my identity is found out, everything falls apart, Peter insisted. He didn't want his life ruined by exposure. Fury's tone softened. All right, go back. Your teacher will worry if you're missing. Peter brightened. Fury was merciful after all. He hurriedly left, pleased to be dismissed so easily. Still naive, Li Ming thought. Agents don't need your consent to make you do things. The next day, Peter got the good news from his teacher. The travel agency had upgraded their tour package for free. They were going to Prague, When Peter saw the new bus driver the travel agency had sent, he knew immediately his summer trip had been hijacked by Nick Fury. The driver was Dimitri, the same man Peter had met with Fury last night. Peter hadn't expected Fury to be so slimy. He didn't want to go to Prague, so Fury had simply rerouted the entire tour group there. There was no getting out of it. The adult world was unexpectedly ruthless. Peter slumped into the back row. MJ and a girl from school were up front. Ned had betrayed him by cozying up to Betty, leaving Peter alone. He took out the gift box Fury had given him overnight, a pair of stylish glasses. Inside was a note, "To the next Tony Stark, I believe in you," and below in tiny print, say Edith. He said it aloud. Preparing for retinal and biometric scan. Scan passed. A calm female voice filled his ear. "Hello, Peter." "Hello, I am Edith, Tony Stark's Enhanced Defense Investigative Tactical Hologram." "He built her for me?" Peter asked, excited. "No," the AI replied, "but you have full access to all of Tony's permissions." Peter didn't yet understand the weight of that. "Want to know what I can do?" Edith offered. "Of course." "Edith stands for Even Dead, I'm the Hero," she explained. Tony loved wordplay. "I have access to the entire Stark Global Security Network, multiple satellites, and backdoors into major telecommunications systems." As Edith talked, she demonstrated. For a moment, Peter saw overlays of everyone's phone interfaces on the bus. He stiffened. He was curious, but he had principles. That was one reason he'd always insisted on building his own suit, even with Tony's resources available. Still, his eyes flicked to Ned and Betty. He saw their messages. "Ned, I miss you. Betty, I miss you more." They were sitting shoulder to shoulder. A sour surge of jealousy hit him. The bus stopped for a break. Dimitri waved him into a small room. Fury, well, the man posing as Fury, knew Peter didn't want to show up in Europe in a Spider-Man suit, so he'd had someone make a new combat uniform. Peter was in the middle of stripping down to try it on when the door swung open. Click! A camera had captured him pulling his pants off in front of a blonde girl. Brad Davis, as though he'd struck gold, darted away to show MJ. Peter yanked his pants back up and chased him. From the doorway, another classmate, Ming, shook his head in mock condemnation while holding a camera. He wasn't above collecting embarrassing photos of superheroes. Back on the bus, heart-pounding, Peter slipped the glasses back on. "What do you need, Peter?" Edith asked. "There's a guy in my class who might ruin things with MJ." Peter stumbled, his habit of nervous babbling getting the better of him. "I can't hear you clearly," Edith said. She wasn't as polished as Jarvis or Friday, and even seemed a bit less intuitive than Karen, Tony's Spider-Man assistant. "Brad Davis, he took a picture of me." Peter blurted his rival's full name. "Brad Davis, is he the target?" Edith asked. Peter, in the heat of it, nodded. "Yes, he's the target." To his horror, Edith immediately initiated an attack protocol. "Confirmed. Target, Brad Davis. Initiating attack." "What do you mean, attack?" Peter demanded. "Interception point confirmed. Launching interceptor vehicle." Somewhere unseen in orbit, an interceptor drone detached and began a rapid descent toward Earth, aiming for the bus. Peter's stomach dropped. He tried to cancel the command, but at that exact moment his glasses slipped off his face. "Look, baby mountain goats!" Peter shouted, desperate, throwing his voice and grabbing everyone's attention. He yanked open the bus's sunroof, vaulted out, and swung on webbing. Midair, he latched onto the incoming drone and tore it apart with a flurry of webs, sending sparks and debris skittering away. He'd just stopped an assassination of his rival, of all people. When he crawled back onto the bus, breathless and embarrassed, he took Edith off and shoved the glasses away. He was terrified of what she could do. This wasn't for him. He couldn't trust himself with something that powerful. Tony had designed Edith for superheroes. The system would have been perfect for Spider-Man. A global intelligence network would have boosted his crime-fighting efficiency, and drones could make up for Spider-Man's lack of large-scale crowd control. Tony had even reasoned that Peter's webs were his primary weapon. Drones could serve as artificial anchor points in open spaces. Tony had truly treated him like a favorite son. Peter didn't know any of that yet. All he felt was panic and shame. Word got back to the man impersonating Fury. "Stark left you a multi-billion-dollar strategic system, and the first thing you do with it is almost blow up your friend?" Fury raged at the pre-battle meeting in Prague. "I warned him. He's nowhere near qualified." Peter couldn't argue. He hung his head and sat on the rooftop alone after the meeting, dejected. Quentin Beck had memorized his lines and was getting ready to approach Peter to build rapport and put himself in position to get Edith. Quentin's team had already set up the show in Prague. In a few hours, Mysterio's staged, self-sacrificial battle with the fire elemental would begin. Ming, of course, wasn't about to miss a chance to cozy up to Peter either. "Quentin, something's happened." William, who handled drone imaging, crackled over Quentin's earpiece, stopping him in his tracks. "Thanks to Luobo Lu Tai Cha and Yumi for their monthly support. It feels so empty today."